The woman on the porch looked too old to have climbed the broken steps and too angry to be stopped by them. Owen Mercer watched through the glassless storm door as she planted a hickory cane between two rotten boards and tested her weight. One bad step would put her through to the dirt. He shoved aside the bucket catching water from the ceiling and hurried outside. "Don't move. I've been moving since before you were born. That porch doesn't care." She glanced down at the sagging boards, then at the blue tarp Owen had stretched over the north half of the roof. Rain had darkened her silver hair. 2 fingertips were missing from her left hand. "You're Grant's youngest," she said. Owen had been living in the house for 19 days, and so far everyone who recognized him had said this as if diagnosing a condition. "Did you know him?" "I knew his best side. Then I knew the rest." She looked past Owen into the dark hall. Her face changed when she saw the row of wooden pegs set beneath the beam. Not softened, struck. "My name is Ruth Halpern," she said. "I built this house." Owen almost laughed. His family had given him a ruin no one wanted, and now a stranger had come through the rain to claim its history. Ruth tightened both hands over her cane. "If you'll let me," she said, "I want to finish it." 19 days earlier, Owen had been sitting in his sister's office beneath a framed certificate that used to hang behind their father's desk. Claire had changed the frame. Grant's had been walnut, heavy and scratched at one corner. Hers was narrow black metal. The certificate looked cleaner now, less like something earned and more like something selected. Evan sat beside Owen with one ankle crossed over his knee, scrolling through messages until Claire closed the office door. "Can we all be here?" she asked. "I'm physically present," Evan said. "That has never been the highest bar in this family." He put his phone face down, there, bereaved and attentive. Claire did not smile, though her mouth considered it. She had worn navy to the funeral and charcoal every day since, as if grief came with a gradual lightening schedule. Her blonde hair was tied tightly at the base of her neck. Grant used to say Claire could make a room confess its expenses merely by entering it. Owen wore the same brown jacket he had worn to the hospital, the funeral home, and the pharmacy where he had returned 3 unopened boxes of injectable medication. There was a pale stain on one cuff from the vanilla nutritional drinks Grant had hated. Claire arranged 3 folders on the desk. "We need to settle the practical things," she said. "Dragging it out won't make it less unpleasant." "It might," Evan said. "Time does wonders for unpleasantness. Look at Owen's jacket." Owen rubbed the stain with his thumb. "Thanks. I'm trying to normalize the atmosphere." "You always do that by making somebody else uncomfortable." Evan turned to him. "See? Normal." Claire laid a hand on the first folder. She had prepared tabs. Claire could tab a wildfire. "The practice transfers to me under the succession agreement Dad signed 4 years ago. That includes this building, the client accounts, the equipment, and the business liabilities." Evan nodded. He already knew. Owen did too, though nobody had shown him the agreement until the previous week. Claire had worked beside Grant for 14 years. The practice was hers in every way, except the one that required Grant to die. "The investment account is a little over 410, she continued. "There are final medical balances, funeral costs, tax preparation, and some outstanding maintenance on the office building. Evan is willing to take responsibility for settling those if the remaining investment assets transfer to him." Owen looked at Evan. "Willing?" Evan spread his hands. "It saves us from itemizing everything for months. You sell houses. Since when are you afraid of itemizing? Since our father died and left receipts in 7 different shoeboxes." "They weren't all receipts," Claire said. "One box was appliance manuals, not even for appliances he owned." Owen waited for either of them to mention the 3rd folder. Claire finally slid it across the desk. The label read, "Calder Property." The house had sat empty for 12 years, although empty was not how Owen remembered it. Empty implied clean floors and patient rooms. The Calder house had always seemed to be holding its breath. Grant used it for storage after Leah died. Then one spring, a pipe burst. The damage was repaired badly, if at all. A storm peeled shingles from the north roof, animals moved into the walls, and somebody broke 2 lakeside windows. Grant responded to each new problem by locking the gate more firmly. "Evan had someone look at it," Claire said. "I looked at it," Evan corrected. "You stood outside and took photographs. That is the first stage of looking." Owen opened the folder. There were 6 printed pictures and a property tax statement. In the first photograph, vines covered the porch rail. In the second, part of the gutter lay in the weeds like a dropped length of intestine. The lot has value, Evan said. The structure has negative value. How negative? Demolition, disposal, grading, permits. Depends what's in the walls. Depends how much of the foundation has moved. Depends whether the septic system is merely ancient or actively vindictive. Claire tapped the folder. The will divides the estate equally by value, but the succession agreement complicates that, and Dad never updated the property appraisal. We can spend months getting competing valuations and paying lawyers to argue about what he intended. Or? Owen asked. She inhaled quietly. Or we agree among ourselves. The agreement was already printed. Claire would receive the practice. Evan would receive the investment account and cover the remaining estate obligations. Owen would receive the Calder property, its contents, and the old pickup parked there, assuming it started. For several seconds, the loudest thing in the office was the little aquarium pump on Claire's bookshelf. The tank held no fish. Grant had kept one blue betta in it for years. After it died, he continued running the pump. You worked this out before the funeral? Owen asked. Claire's chin lifted. I started gathering information while Dad was in hospice. He was in hospice for 9 days, and somebody had to think beyond those 9 days. Owen looked at the pictures again. Black shingles, green water in the gutters, a maple branch pressing into the roof. He had spent those 9 days measuring morphine, changing sheets, opening windows when Grant claimed the apartment smelled like burned pennies, and calling Claire and Evan with updates they acknowledged by text. He had not thought beyond those days. Some mornings, he had not thought beyond the next 15 minutes. Evan leaned forward. There's another option. I'll give you $5,000 for your interest in the place. Cash. Then Claire and I deal with clearing it and selling the lot. Claire looked at him sharply. That wasn't part of what we discussed. It's an offer? To Owen or the estate? To Owen. You can't buy something before it's distributed. That is why human beings invented contingent agreements. Owen closed the folder. 5,000. Which is more useful to you than a condemned house, Evan said. No offense. Why would that offend me? I mean, with the rent situation. Claire's eyes moved to Owen's face. What rent situation? He hated Evan for telling her. He hated himself more for having told Evan first. I'm behind. How far? It's handled. How far, Owen? 2 months. Claire sat back. Her expression was not cruel. That made it worse. It was the look she used when a client revealed a debt after insisting the numbers were fine. You should have said something. I just did. You said it's handled. And now you know why. She pressed 2 fingers to her temple. You left the hotel? The hotel left me. Evan made a low sound. That is an extremely Owen way to describe getting fired. I missed 3 shifts. You disappeared during 3 shifts. Dad had fallen twice that week. We could have hired someone, Claire said. Owen looked at her. I asked. The empty aquarium gurgled between them. Claire's face closed first. We're not going to litigate the last year. No, Owen said. That might drag out the unpleasantness. Evan reached for the property folder and turned it so the photographs faced Owen again. Take the 5, get current on rent, find another job, give yourself breathing room. It was sensible advice. That was the family talent, arranging an insult so neatly that objecting to it made you look unreasonable. Owen imagined taking the money, 2 months' rent, groceries, a deposit against whatever came next. In 6 months, Evan would sell the lot to one of his clients. The ruined house would come down in a day. Claire would say it was sad but necessary. Owen would be invited to look at photographs of the new place, all glass and pale stone, perhaps with a framed piece of reclaimed wood mounted near the entry to prove something had been respected. Does the truck run? Owen asked. Evan blinked. What? The pickup. It ran when Dad parked it. When was that? Obama was president. Helpful. Claire studied him. Owen, the house isn't habitable. Neither is my apartment after Tuesday. Her composure slipped. You're being evicted? My lease is ending. Because you're being evicted. The letter uses more words. Evan pushed back from the desk. This is exactly why 5,000 makes sense. Owen opened the folder again and found the key taped inside the back cover. It was brass, long-necked, with a square green tag. Grant's handwriting had faded to a brown scrawl. Lake, front. There had once been a back key, too. Leah kept it above the kitchen sink inside a ceramic fish with an open mouth. Owen could see the fish more clearly than he could see his mother's face on certain mornings. Give Claire the practice, he said. Give Evan the investments. Claire went still. And you'll take Calder? Yes. Owen, Evan said, don't turn a bad building into a personality. I already have a personality. You complain about it constantly. I am trying to keep you from making a decision because you're angry. Owen slipped the key from the plastic sleeve. I'm not angry. All three of them knew this was a lie, but only Claire looked wounded by it. The pickup did not start. It did, however, contain a jack, a rusted socket set, 3 empty coffee cans, and a mouse that left through the passenger side floor before Owen fully understood what he was seeing. He arrived at the lake in the late afternoon with everything he owned packed into his aging Honda. Rain had followed him north from town, a thin April rain that blurred the trees and turned the unpaved drive dark beneath his tires. The chain at the gate had been cut and tied back together with orange extension cord. Beyond it, the house emerged slowly through the branches. It was larger than he remembered and lower to the ground, built from gray cedar and fieldstone, with broad eaves and a roof that descended in several uneven planes. The lake showed behind it in flashes of pewter. One corner of the porch had sunk enough to make the railing tilt. A sapling grew through the steps. Owen sat in the car after switching off the engine. The silence was immediate. No traffic through the apartment wall, no oxygen machine. No television turned too loud, because Grant refused to admit he could not hear it. Just rain ticking on the Honda's roof, and something metallic knocking at the rear of the house. He carried in a flashlight, a sleeping bag, and the tire iron. The key marked Lake, front opened the side door. The smell met him first. Wet plaster, mouse droppings, old ashes, and the sweet fungal odor of wood that had stayed damp too long. He pulled his shirt over his nose and swept the flashlight across the room. A chair lay on its side. Cabinet doors stood open. Brown water stains spread over the ceiling like continents. Someone had left a chipped mug on the counter beside a bottle of hot sauce that had expired 9 years earlier. Great, Owen said aloud. Condiments. His voice traveled farther than it should have. The beam found a wide central hall, a stone hearth, and heavy posts darkened with age. Along one beam ran a row of wooden pegs, each shaped by hand. None were alike. The house was ruined. Evan had not exaggerated that. But standing beneath the leaking roof, Owen saw something his brother's photographs had missed. The posts lined up through 3 rooms. The windows on opposite walls matched each other exactly. Even the battered central hall seemed aimed toward the lake, as though the whole house had been built around a door that had never been installed. Rainwater struck the floor behind him. Owen set down his sleeping bag, found a bucket, and placed it beneath the leak. Then he found another bucket. The second bucket had a crack in the bottom. Owen discovered this after carrying it across the kitchen and leaving a dotted trail over the one section of floor that had been dry. He stood over it with his hands on his hips while water gathered around his boots. Excellent, he told the bucket. You had one job. He emptied it out the side door, dried the floor with a towel from his car, and used an old saucepan instead. By midnight, he had assembled a collection of containers beneath every active leak. 2 buckets, the saucepan, a plastic storage bin, and the ceramic fish that had once held the back door key in its mouth. Finding it at the rear of a kitchen cabinet unsettled him more than the damage had. The fish was smaller than he remembered, glazed white with faded blue scales. Its mouth was empty. He washed away mouse dirt and set it on the counter, then moved it under the slowest drip. He chose the former dining room to sleep in because its ceiling appeared intact and its door still closed. A nest occupied one corner. He removed it with a fireplace shovel, swept until his breathing turned gritty, and unrolled the sleeping bag on a rectangle of floor between the wall and an overturned table. The rain strengthened after dark. Every part of the house answered differently. Water tapped metal in the kitchen. Wind pushed a loose screen against the lakeside wall. Somewhere above him, claws moved in quick, purposeful lines. The house clicked, groaned, and occasionally gave a deep wooden knock that made him sit up and grip the tire iron. At 2 a.m, Owen found himself listening for Grant. He still woke expecting the scrape of slippers, the bathroom light, the sharp little cough that meant his father had tried to stand without calling him. The silence after those sounds failed to come was not peaceful. It was an absence with edges. He pulled the sleeping bag over his head. Should have taken the money, he whispered. The house offered no opinion. Morning exposed what the flashlight had spared him. The north hallway ceiling had collapsed into a wet gray heap. Mushrooms grew beside the baseboard in one bedroom. The porch roof had separated from the main wall, and the metallic knocking came from a gutter bracket striking the siding whenever the wind shifted. Owen walked the exterior with a notebook from Grant's office. Claire had placed a box of unwanted supplies near the back door after the funeral: legal pads, pens with the practice name, 3 staplers, and 37 promotional magnets printed with Grant's smiling face. Owen had taken the notebook and left the magnets. He wrote roof first. Under it, he wrote foundation, electric, water, septic, windows, animals, mold. After studying the list, he added coffee. The power had been disconnected, but an outdoor hand pump near the workshop produced rusty water after 12 stubborn strokes. Owen filled a jar, held it to the light, and decided not to die of pioneer enthusiasm. The marina opened at 7. Its main building sat a quarter-mile down the shore, beyond a stand of white pines and a row of boat slips mostly empty for the season. Owen drove because carrying soap and a towel along the road felt too much like announcing his circumstances. A brass bell above the marina door gave a weak clunk when he entered. The woman behind the counter was kneeling beside an open space heater with a screwdriver between her teeth. She wore work pants, a red flannel shirt, and a dark braid looped through the back of a baseball cap. An elderly Labrador slept beside her with the resigned expression of a creature accustomed to repairs. "We're closed," she said around the screwdriver. "The sign says, open. The sign is an optimist." Owen waited. She removed the screwdriver. "Fuel dock opens at 8. Store opens when the heater stops trying to poison me." "I don't need fuel. Bait? No? Then you're either lost or selling religion. I need a shower." She looked him over slowly, not with interest but assessment. His jacket was damp, his hair had dried in several directions, and a faint streak of plaster crossed one cheek. "That religion might be a hard sell," she said. He nodded toward the painted sign beside the counter. "Seasonal shower, passes available. Are those available to people without boats?" "They're available to people with $12. He paid. She gave him a key attached to a yellow plastic float. "Last door on the right. Give the hot water a minute. It has trust issues. Thank you. You're at the Mercer place." It was not a question. Owen stopped. "How can you tell? You smell like the Mercer place." The Labrador opened one eye. The woman set the heater cover back in position. "Tessa Alvarez." "Owen, I know. You have your father's posture." He straightened involuntarily. "What does that mean? Like you're waiting for a refund?" Before he could answer, the heater coughed to life. Tessa leaned away and watched it suspiciously. "My father came here? He owed us for winterizing his boat." "What boat?" "Exactly." The shower produced 6 minutes of hot water and then turned glacial. Owen came out cleaner, awake, and irritated enough to feel almost normal. Tessa was making coffee in a dented steel pot. "What happened to the boat?" he asked. "Sold for storage charges years ago." "It barely covered them. Was that legal?" "It was generous. My aunt waited 31 months. Owen looked toward the sleeping Labrador. "That's Wally," Tessa said. "He doesn't know anything about maritime liens. I wasn't going to ask him." "You had the face." She poured coffee into a paper cup and held it out. Owen reached for his wallet. "It's not good enough to charge for." He tasted it. "That's honest. Lake businesses survive on honesty and people forgetting to check their credit card statements." He smiled despite himself. Tessa leaned both forearms on the counter. "You staying up there? For now? That roof won't last through another hard storm." "So I've heard." "From the roof?" "Mostly." She nodded toward a corkboard covered with handwritten cards. "Dock repair, engine service, firewood, seasonal cleaning. Cal Jensen sometimes takes patch jobs. His number's there. I can patch it." "You a roofer?" "Maintenance." "For what?" "A hotel. Hotels usually have flat roofs." This one had 3 buildings, 2 restaurants, an indoor pool, and owners who believed water damage was a character-building exercise. "Then you're qualified for Calder." Her use of the house's name, not his father's, caught him. "Did you ever go inside?" "Once." "When?" Tessa took a drink of coffee, winced at her own product, and poured the rest into the sink. "Long enough ago that I didn't need permission." The answer closed the subject without hostility. Owen recognized the technique. Claire did the same thing with better posture. He took Cal Jensen's number, but did not call it. Instead, he spent the next 4 days making the dining room dry enough to trust. He hauled ruined fabric and swollen particle board to the dump in the Honda, one load at a time. He covered the broken windows with plywood. He cut back branches pressing against the siding and discovered a narrow stone path underneath the weeds. The work did not improve the house so much as reveal more ways it had failed. The plumbing lines had split in 3 places. Squirrels had stripped insulation from the attic. A bathroom sink came away from the wall when Owen leaned on it, forcing him to catch it with both hands and stand trapped until he could lower it without breaking the remaining pipe. He found humor where he could. He labeled the safe dining room outlet the grid. He named the largest raccoon, unseen but heavily implied, Dennis. He informed Dennis each evening that formal eviction proceedings had begun. At night, he studied repair videos on his phone until the signal failed or his eyes closed. He slept better after exhausting himself, though occasionally he woke with the certainty that Grant had called his name. Claire telephoned on the 5th day. "Are you alive?" "Not according to the electric company. I'm serious." "So is the electric company," she exhaled. "I called your landlord. He said you moved everything." "You called my landlord?" "You weren't answering. I was on the roof." There was a pause long enough to contain several arguments. Evan said, "There's structural damage," she said. Evan says that about restaurants where the tables wobble. Owen, "I'm careful. Do you have running water?" "I have water. It runs through several parts of the house." "That isn't funny." "It's a little funny." Claire lowered her voice. "You can stay with me?" The offer surprised him. Claire's guest room had white carpeting, a glass desk, and a bed covered with pillows no human spine could justify. "For how long?" "Until you find work, and if I don't?" "You will." He heard the confidence in her answer and the condition underneath it. "I'm all right here. You just said you don't have electricity." "I said the electric company doesn't consider me alive. I'm in negotiations." "Don't turn this into some test Dad failed to give you." The words landed more accurately than he wanted. "I need to get back to the roof," he said. "If you need money, I don't." "That wasn't what I asked." He ended the call before she could finish. The next day he found work. Tessa's launch ramp had lifted at one corner, leaving a sharp edge that caught the small-wheeled dollies used to move boats. She had planned to replace 3 sections. Owen crawled underneath, dug mud from around the supports, and found that one crosspiece had twisted while the others remained sound. "You don't need new decking," he told her. "You need 2 brackets and a jack." Cal said, "Replace it. Cal probably owns more decking than brackets." She stared at him for a moment, then handed him the screwdriver she had tucked behind one ear. It took 6 hours, 2 steel brackets, and more swearing than either of them admitted contributing. Tessa paid him $200 and added a month to his shower pass. "That's too much," Owen said. "The ramp works. It's still too much. Then answer when I call you again." She did call, first for a sticking storage room door, then for a leaking faucet in the employee bathroom. A man at the fuel dock asked Owen to repair 2 steps at his cottage. The steps led to a loose railing, which led to a warped gate. None of it paid much, but the money bought roofing felt, screws, gloves, and a used extension ladder that shivered alarmingly above 12 feet. At the building supply store, Owen saw a stack of cedar boards priced beyond anything he could earn one faucet at a time. He thought of the collapsed north porch, where weathered planks lay beneath vines. Most were rotten at the ends, but several might be sound through the middle. He tore a page from Grant's notebook and wrote, "Reclaimed old-growth cedar. Trade for framing, lumber or roofing material. Calder Lake House. Ask for Owen." The clerk read it before pinning it to the board. "Old growth?" he asked. "Old, anyway." "You sure it's cedar?" "No." The clerk uncapped a red marker and circled the word reclaimed. "That'll make people believe you." On the 19th morning, rain started before dawn. Owen was moving a bucket when the knock came. He found Ruth Halpern on the porch, testing the rotten boards with her cane and looking into the house as though something inside had been waiting for her. Now, after telling him her name and asking to finish what she had begun, she watched him absorb the impossible shape of the offer. "You built it when?" Owen asked. "Started in 87, walked off in 89. "You walked off?" "That's the short version. What's the long version?" Ruth looked at the sagging porch roof. "Drier," she said, "and less likely to kill me." He helped her across the threshold. She accepted his arm without thanking him and released it the moment her boots touched solid floor. Inside, She removed her wet coat and draped it over the overturned chair. Then she crossed directly to the handmade pegs beneath the beam. Her damaged hand hovered over them. "You put these here?" Owen asked. "Your mother shaped 3 of them." He looked from the pegs to Ruth's face. "You knew my mother?" Ruth gave him a tired, almost irritated glance. "This wasn't your father's house when we started," she said. "It was hers." Owen glanced at the ceramic fish sitting beneath its ceiling drift. Dad owned it. Grant paid the mortgage. That isn't the same thing. Usually it is. Ruth ignored this. She walked into the central hall, her cane touching the floor ahead of each step. The house seemed to alter around her. Not improve, exactly. It simply stopped being anonymous. She paused beneath the first post and looked up without using Owen's flashlight. That brace was supposed to continue through the kitchen wall, she said. Grant decided an open doorway would impress people. Did it? It impressed the wall. The wall's been trying to lie down ever since. Owen followed her into the kitchen. Ruth opened the cabinet beneath the sink and grunted at the split pipes. She pushed one door until it caught, lifted it slightly, and closed it cleanly. "Your father hung that." "How can you tell?" He believed hinges responded to confidence. She continued toward the rear pantry, where Owen had stacked salvaged boards according to what he guessed was their condition. Ruth ran her thumb over the end grain of one. "This came off the porch?" "North side. Put it back under cover. It's soft at both ends. Then it's shorter than it used to be. That doesn't make it useless. You came because of my notice. I came because a clerk named Nolan telephoned me and said an idiot at Calder was selling old-growth cedar without knowing if it was cedar. I'm not selling it." That was the part Nolan admired. She moved through the pantry into the room Owen had begun calling the workshop because of its thick floor and wide double doors. Rusted brackets lined one wall. A long workbench stood beneath the windows, its top scarred by saw cuts and dark circular burns. Owen had cleared away rotted cardboard boxes but left the tools he found. A hand plane with no blade, 3 masonry chisels, a brace drill, and a wooden mallet cracked along its head. Ruth touched the workbench. For the first time since entering, she was completely still. Owen waited. He had spent enough time with grief to know that questions could become a way of protecting yourself from someone else's silence. Ruth took her hand away. "Leah wanted this room first," she said. "Before a finished kitchen. Before bedroom walls. She thought if the house could produce something, the rest could be built out of it." Produce what? Whatever was needed. Furniture, repairs, work. "My mother was a physical therapist. She also knew how to sharpen a plane iron and make peach preserves. She bought preserves at the grocery store. Later, perhaps." The correction irritated him, partly because it came from a stranger, and partly because Ruth did not sound as if she were trying to impress him. She was remembering a person Owen had received mostly in fragments. A laugh from another room, hands dusted with flour, a wool coat that smelled of cold air. Leah had died when Owen was an adult, but illness had taken pieces of her before death made the taking official. Grant's version of her had gradually replaced his own. According to him, Leah had been gentle, impractical, and happiest when he made decisions. Ruth's Leah sounded like someone who carried a sharpening stone. "How well did you know her?" he asked. Ruth looked toward the lake windows. "Well enough to argue?" "That's not an answer. It's the answer I have today. You arrive at my house, tell me you built it, tell me it belonged to my mother, then ration the explanation. Yes. Why? Because the roof is open and the weather is getting worse. History stays wet longer than framing. Owen almost asked her to leave. She had walked in and made herself an authority over his memories, his lumber, and the order in which he was permitted to understand either. Even Claire offered a folder before taking control of a room. Then wind pushed rain against the plywood covering the lake windows. Water ticked into the ceramic fish. "What do you mean by finish it?" he asked. Ruth turned back toward him. "I mean, make it sound. Complete the drainage, close the north roof, brace the central span, restore the stove flue, and put in the lakeside doors that should have been there from the beginning. With what money? Yours, ideally. I have $214 until Tessa pays me for a gate. Then we should avoid marble. Were you offering to help or submitting a bid? I'm offering knowledge and the work these hands can still do." Ruth raised them. The missing fingertips were on her left hand, the index shortened below the nail, and the middle finger cut closer to the first joint. "I can't carry shingles up a ladder. I can tell you which section will fall when you put the ladder in the wrong place. Comforting. It ought to be. What do you get? The chance to finish. That's all? No. I want use of the workshop when it's safe. I have jobs I can't handle alone anymore. You need paying work. If we take anything on together, we divide it according to labor and material. You don't know if I'm any good. I know you saved 8 lengths of cedar other people would have thrown away. I also put a cracked bucket under a leak. I saw the floor. The rain softened. Ruth leaned her cane against the workbench and tried to lift one end of the wooden mallet. Her left hand failed to close around the handle. She adjusted without comment, using both hands. Owen looked away first. What happened? He asked. Table saw. That's all? That story costs coffee. I don't have coffee. Then you can't afford the story. She set down the mallet. Show me the roof from inside. Ruth's inspection lasted nearly 2 hours. She moved slowly, but never aimlessly. She made Owen open walls he had covered with plastic, then scolded him for touching one section before she could check whether anything nested behind it. Dennis the raccoon, if present, kept his opinion private. She pressed a screwdriver into darkened framing and made him smell the wood shavings. Rot, Owen said. Old rot. Dry now. It rained last night. The damage didn't. Different problem. She showed him how the north roof leak traveled along a rafter and entered 6 feet from the missing shingles. She found the reason the central hall felt unusually wide. The dark posts concealed paired beams that carried the load toward the outer walls. On the kitchen side, one beam ended above the enlarged doorway, supported by a steel plate hidden beneath a strip of badly fitted trim. That's good, right? Owen asked. It's not terrible. High praise. It means whoever installed the plate understood the load. You? No. Dad? Ruth snorted. Grant disliked any tool that required eye protection. They reached the north hallway. Owen had shoveled most of the collapsed ceiling into contractor bags, but broken lath still hung overhead. Ruth stopped at the entrance. Don't walk down there. I've been down there. That doesn't improve the floor. It felt solid. So did your porch. She made him fetch the long fireplace poker. Lying flat at the threshold, Owen extended it beneath the debris and pressed. The floor resisted near the wall. 2 feet farther, the poker punched through with almost no force. He stared at the dark hole. Ruth said nothing. Fine, he muttered. That was useful. Be careful. Gratitude can become habit-forming. She had him close the hallway door and write unsafe across it in red marker. He added really beneath it. Outside, the rain had become mist. Ruth circled the house by way of the stone path Owen had uncovered. Behind the north corner, she stopped so abruptly that he nearly walked into her. A shallow trench followed the slope above the house. Leaves and soil had filled it until only a depression remained. Beneath the debris, Owen could see fitted stones. Drainage? He asked. Supposed to be. He crouched and pulled away a clump of wet leaves. Water gathered in the exposed channel and began moving toward the lake. You built this too? I laid the first course. It was meant to run along the full uphill side, feed into 2 stone channels, and empty below the workshop. It doesn't? Grant stopped it there. She pointed toward a section buried beneath blackberry vines. Said nobody would see the back of the house. Water would. That was my argument. Owen used a branch to clear another foot. More water joined the first stream. Such a small movement, barely the width of a finger. Yet the soil beside the foundation stopped shining almost immediately. He looked up at Ruth. What else did he stop? Her jaw tightened. Enough. That's still not an answer. Grant and I disagreed about how to build the house. He said you were bad at it. Grant said many things about people after they stopped being useful to him. She walked toward the lake before he could ask more. The rear of the house faced the water through 4 tall openings. 2 held cracked windows. 1 was covered with Owen's plywood. The 4th had been closed with siding that did not match the rest. Ruth placed her palm against the mismatched boards. This was meant to open, she said. To what? She pointed at the floor inside. The hall runs straight here. The kitchen opens into it. Workshop on the left, pantry behind. You could move a table from one end to the other without turning it. Why? Because Leah hated rooms that could do only one thing. The lake stretched beyond the dead grass, restless under the gray sky. In summer, Owen remembered, light struck the water hard enough to hurt your eyes. The house had not been designed to admire that view from a protected distance. It had been designed to open itself to it. Why didn't she finish it after you left? He asked. Ruth's shoulders lowered a fraction. That question belongs to her marriage. They were my parents. They were also people when you weren't in the room. He disliked the sentence because he could not argue with it. Ruth checked her watch. I need to go. You haven't told me what this will cost. I don't know. That's reassuring. You want false precision? Call your brother. Owen folded his arms against the damp. You know, Evan, I know his signs. They appear wherever trees used to be. Despite himself, Owen laughed. Ruth studied him, as if the sound had given her information. I'll make a materials list, she said. Only what keeps the damage from getting worse. You decide after that. You already drove out here. I've driven out here before. The humor left her voice. Owen looked toward the house. From the yard, its roofline appeared beyond saving. Up close, he could now see where the original shingles ended and later patches began, where the gutter should have continued, where water had been permitted to choose its own path. When? He asked. When what? When did you drive out here before? Ruth picked up her cane from where she had rested it against the wall. Every few years, she said. I'd get as far as the gate. And then? Your father still lived here. Not for the last 12 years. No. Then why didn't you come in? Ruth looked at the plywood-covered opening Leah had intended as doors. Because by then, she said, I was afraid the house would prove him right. She walked toward an old green station wagon parked near the drive. Owen followed, giving her room over the uneven ground. At the car, Ruth opened the rear hatch. The cargo area held a battered toolbox, a folded canvas apron, 2 levels, and a framing square dark with age. She lifted out a coil of rope and handed it to him. What's this for? Your ladder. The feet are sliding. You saw that? I saw the trench you made climbing it. Owen glanced back at the extension ladder, leaning against the workshop eave. One foot had indeed sunk deeper than the other. Ruth pulled a yellow pad from the toolbox and began writing. First, we stabilize the ladder. Then we cover the roof properly. Then we open the drain. We? She kept writing. You haven't said no. I haven't said yes. The house has. Owen looked at the blue tarp fluttering above the north rooms. That sounds like something people say before they ask for free labor. Ruth tore off the page and handed it to him. At the top, she had written, Keep it dry. Beneath that were 6 materials, 3 dimensions, and a note to save every sound piece of cedar. Owen read the list twice. When do we start? Ruth shut the hatch. You already did. Ruth returned the following morning with coffee, a folding chair, and an opinion about Owen's ladder. Take it down. I tied the feet. You tied 1 foot to a shrub. It's a substantial shrub. It's a hydrangea. It has roots. So do you. That doesn't make you structural. Owen lowered the ladder. Ruth drank her coffee while he cleared a level patch beside the house, laid 2 scrap boards across the soil, and secured the ladder to an eye bolt she made him install in sound framing. Only after testing it herself did she hand him a paper cup. The coffee was hot, black, and strong enough to remove paint. This tastes expensive, he said. It wasn't. That's why it tastes like this. She unfolded the yellow materials list on the workbench. Owen had priced everything at 3 stores. The cheapest total was $586, not including shingles. He had $214 in his account, and $200 coming from Tessa for the repaired gate. We can wait on the rigid foam, Ruth said. Buy the underlayment, fasteners, 2 sheets of plywood, and the flashing. That still puts me short. How short? 107. You own a working car? Mostly. Then you aren't short. You're delayed. Ruth said it without pity, which made the delay feel temporary rather than shameful. They began with the roof sections that cost nothing. Owen climbed while Ruth remained in the yard, calling out where he could place his weight. The pitch looked gentle from below. From above, the drop to the Lakeside yard seemed long enough to reconsider every decision that had brought him there. Stay over the rafters, Ruth called. I am. You're standing on sheathing between them. How can you tell? Because the roof is bending. Owen moved 1 boot 6 inches left. The surface firmed beneath him. Better? My blood pressure thinks so. He removed branches, loose shingles, and the remains of an animal nest packed beneath the blue tarp. Ruth had him save intact shingles in one pile and questionable ones in another. They're 30 years old, he said. So am I, if anyone asks. You know I'm 29, then you should know better than to judge something by the weathering. She made him pull out 3 rows around the largest opening. Beneath them, the plywood had delaminated into layers he could peel with his fingers. The damage was broad but shallow, stopping 2 rafters before Evan's photographs suggested it would. How bad? Ruth asked. Bad. That word doesn't buy material. Measure. He measured. They spent the morning converting disaster into dimensions. By noon, Owen's hands were black with old roofing tar. Ruth had shifted her folding chair 3 times to remain in the sun. She never complained about her hip, but Owen noticed how carefully she stood after sitting. When he came down, she made him eat half a sandwich before discussing the next task. I'm not hungry. You're shaking. I've had coffee. That explains the shaking. It doesn't excuse it. The sandwich contained turkey, mustard, and enough horseradish to clear his sinuses. You make this? I assembled it. Don't romanticize lunch. Her own sandwich sat untouched in its waxed paper. Owen nodded toward it. You're not eating? I had breakfast. You're shaking too. Ruth held out her left hand. It trembled slightly at rest. Nerve damage. It does that whether I'm hungry or not. He looked at the missing fingertips, then back at her face. Coffee story? He asked. Your coffee was free. Partial story? The saw was running. My hand was nearby. They became acquainted. Did it happen here? No. Did you blame the saw? I blame myself for 6 months, then the guard for 6, then the man who'd removed the guard for maintenance and failed to replace it. After a year, I got bored with blame and learned to hold things differently. She picked up her sandwich with both hands. People think the lesson of losing fingers is to be careful, she said. The lesson is that every tool assumes you're paying attention. Houses are the same. Owen looked up at the exposed roof. Did my father pay attention? Ruth chewed slowly. Sometimes to the wrong thing. She would say no more. Tessa paid Owen that afternoon. She stood at the repaired gate, opening and closing it with one boot while he waited. It's a gate, he said, not a piano. I know how a gate works. You've tested it 11 times. 11 is where certainty begins. She handed him an envelope. Heard Ruth Halpern was at your place. The town's communication system apparently traveled faster than electricity. From who? Nolan saw her buy coffee. Ruth doesn't buy coffee unless somebody else needs punishment. She built the house. I know. Owen stared at her. You knew? I knew Halpern did work up there. Didn't know how much. Why didn't you tell me? You didn't ask who built it. You asked if I'd been inside. That feels technical. Living here requires technical answers. Tessa leaned against the gatepost. Wind pulled loose strands from beneath her cap. My aunt liked Ruth, she said. Your father did not. I've gathered that. He said she walked off with the house unfinished. She says he changed the work and stopped paying. Both could be true. Owen looked at the envelope. Everyone keeps saying things like that. Most arguments survive because both people have enough truth to feed them. He tucked the envelope into his jacket. You practice that? No. My aunt said it. I practice remembering useful sentences. Before he left, Tessa gave him 2 heavy tarps from the marina's storage room. They have holes, she said, but only in places you can see. How much? Bring them back before boat season. He folded them into the Honda. Why are you helping me? I'm protecting the watershed from your roof. Of course. And if you fall through it, fall toward the road. The lake's too cold. At the supply store, Owen spent $392 and felt each number leave his body. He brought the plywood and flashing home, strapped to the Honda's roof with borrowed marina rope. Above 40 miles an hour, the sheets hummed like an enormous reed instrument. Ruth was waiting by the workshop when he arrived. Beside her green station wagon stood a silver sedan Owen recognized. Claire wore ankle boots unsuitable for mud and held a paper grocery bag against her coat. She looked from the plywood on his car to the secured ladder to Ruth. Owen switched off the engine. What are you doing here? He asked. Claire's eyebrows rose. Hello to you too. Ruth remained near the workshop doors, both hands resting on her cane. Her expression revealed nothing. Claire held out the bag. Food. I have food. You have hot sauce that expired during Dad's first term as treasurer of the Rotary Club. That was here. That's why I brought food. Inside the bag were canned soup, bread, apples, coffee, and a box of the vanilla nutritional drinks Grant had hated. Owen lifted the box. Those aren't funny. I didn't mean them to be. They were on sale. They always are. Nobody likes them. Claire looked at Ruth again. Evan said someone was working on the house. Evan hasn't been here. He saw the materials on your car in town. Of course he did. Ruth stepped forward. Hello, Claire. Claire's attention sharpened. Have we met? No. You look like Leah around the eyes. The observation struck Claire harder than Owen expected. Her grip tightened on the grocery bag before she released it to him. You knew our mother, Claire said. Yes. Dad said you were the contractor who abandoned the job. I was the builder who left it. That sounds like the same sentence with better public relations. Ruth's mouth tilted. You sound like Gran around the mouth. Owen coughed to hide a laugh and failed. Claire turned on him. Did you hire her? No. Then what is she doing? Preventing him from putting a ladder through his own window, Ruth said. I'm asking Owen. Owen set the groceries on the porch rail, then moved them when the rail shifted. She offered to help me stabilize the house. For free? For use of the workshop later. We split any paid jobs we do together. Claire looked toward the workshop's broken doors. Paid jobs doing what? Repairs. You don't have electricity. People repaired things before electricity, not competitively. Ruth glanced at Owen. She did get Grant's mouth. Claire stepped closer to her. My father said you cost him thousands of dollars. Your father cost himself thousands of dollars. I helped with some of it. It was the first admission Owen had heard from Ruth that Grant's accusations might contain anything beyond spite. Claire heard it too. What does that mean? She asked. It means your brother has plywood tied to his car and rain expected by evening. Ruth took the rope end and began loosening the knot. Claire watched her, furious at being dismissed. Then she grabbed the other end. The three of them carried the first sheet to the house. Claire nearly lost a boot in the mud and responded by carrying the second sheet alone with Owen, refusing Ruth's directions until she backed into the hydrangea and swore. Substantial shrub, Owen said. Shut up. They covered the roof opening before dark. Owen worked above while Claire passed material from the ladder and Ruth called measurements from below. Claire stayed in her office clothes, smearing roofing sealant across one sleeve. She complained about the cold, the mud, Evan, the cost of the correct fasteners, and Owen's refusal to wear a proper tool belt. She did not complain about being asked to help. When they finished, the new patch lay flat and square beneath the tarp, its edges secured under sound shingles instead of weighted with bricks. The repair was temporary, but the coming rain would move over the house rather than into it. Claire stood in the yard, rubbing her hands together. You can still stay with me, she said. I know. I'm not saying you failed. I know. You always say that when you want me to stop talking. I know. She shook her head, but some of the anger had left her face. At the car, she paused beside Ruth. If he gets hurt, he'll blame himself for 6 months, Ruth said. Then the ladder. Then me. That isn't an answer. It's the one I have today. Claire gave Owen a look that suggested he deserved Ruth, then drove away. Rain began after midnight. Owen woke at the first hard burst and reached automatically for his flashlight. He checked the saucepan, the plastic bin, both buckets, and the ceramic fish. The old leaks continued their separate rhythms, but beneath the repaired section, the floor stayed dry. He stood there barefoot, listening to water strike the roof and pass over him. In the morning, Ruth put a shovel in his hands. Don't get sentimental, she said. We still have to teach it where to go. The shovel sank 4 inches into black leaves and stopped against stone. Owen put his boot on the blade. Not like that, Ruth said. He looked over his shoulder. It's a shovel. It's a stone drain. At the moment, it's a compost pile. If you break the capstones, it becomes an expensive compost pile. She handed him a narrow garden trowel from the canvas apron tied around her waist. The apron was faded brown, its pockets fitted to specific tools. One empty pocket had been stitched shut. You want me to clear this with that? I want you to find the edges before you start behaving like a machine. Owen knelt in the wet leaves. Cold seeped through both knees of his jeans. They worked from the exposed section near the north corner, following the drain uphill. Owen loosened packed soil while Ruth lifted leaves and roots with a 3-pronged cultivator. Her hip kept her from kneeling, so she bent from the waist until her breath shortened, then straightened and pretended to study their progress. After 20 minutes, Owen began placing stones near the channel to give her somewhere to sit. He did not mention why. Ruth did not acknowledge the arrangement, but she used each stone when they reached it. The drain curved around the house, wider than Owen expected, and constructed from flat rock set at opposing angles. Much of it remained intact beneath years of accumulation. Whenever they cleared another section, trapped water slipped forward with a soft sucking sound. "Why stone?" Owen asked. "Because the property had stone. Pipes would have been easier, until a root crushed one, or a truck drove over it, or somebody forgot where it was." "Stone doesn't forget?" "Stone holds a grudge. Different thing." Near the rear of the house, the channel ended abruptly beneath a mat of blackberry roots. There was no collapse, only two parallel foundation stones stopping in clean lines. Owen pushed the trowel into the soil beyond them. "This is where Grant stopped you." Ruth sat on one of his stones and flexed her left hand. "This is where Grant stopped paying for drainage. That's not the same thing. At the time, it was." He scraped away another layer of soil. "So, what were you going to do?" "Continue downhill beside the workshop. There's a natural swale below the big pine." "I've seen it." "Good. Your eyes work, usually." "We'd line the section near the wall, then leave the lower run open. Water goes where gravity sends it. Building is mostly learning not to take that personally." They had enough stone scattered around the property to complete the missing section. What they lacked was gravel for the bed. Ruth made a call from the porch and located half a load left over from a driveway job 6 miles away. Owen paid $75 for delivery and watched the pile land beside the workshop with the terrible finality of money becoming rock. While they waited, Ruth studied the central hall. "We need to brace that opening," she said. "You told me it wasn't terrible." "I said the steel plate understood the load. I didn't say the studs under it were happy." "How much? Material or happiness?" "Material. 2 posts, a header, fasteners. Less if the beam in the shed is sound." "What shed?" Ruth pointed through the lake windows. Beyond a thicket of alder, almost hidden by the slope, stood a low structure Owen had mistaken for a fallen section of fence. They found the shed leaning against 2 trees. Its door had rotted off, and half its roof lay inside. Beneath the collapse were cedar offcuts, window frames, lengths of iron pipe, and a beam wrapped in brittle building paper. Ruth used her cane to move debris aside. "That was supposed to go above the kitchen opening. It's been outside for 30 years. So, have trees. That isn't how lumber works." She looked at him. "You're becoming tiresome in very specific ways." They carried the beam into the workshop and set it on supports. The outer inch had weathered gray, but the grain beneath was dense and dry. Owen pressed a screwdriver into the end. It barely marked. "Old-growth cedar," Ruth said. "You're sure?" "No, but I have a red marker if you want confidence." He laughed and heard Ruth do the same, a brief rough sound as though the habit had gone unused. The gravel truck arrived while they were brushing dirt from the beam. Tessa followed it in the marina's flatbed, bringing 2 wheelbarrows and a thermos. "I came for the watershed," she announced. "Of course," Owen said. "And Ruth called me, that too." Tessa poured coffee into 3 mismatched travel cups. Ruth drank hers and winced. "This is worse than mine. I learned from the lake." For the rest of the afternoon, Owen moved gravel while Tessa set stone under Ruth's direction. Tessa had the efficient strength of someone accustomed to engines, docks, and objects that became heavier when wet. She argued with Ruth about the width of the channel, lost, and widened it without sulking. At the workshop corner, the ground dropped sharply. Owen wanted to build a straight run to the swale. Ruth made him curve it around a cedar root and reinforce the outer edge with larger stones. "The tree will move it anyway," he said. "The tree will move slowly. That gives you time to notice." Tessa leaned on her shovel. "You give this speech to people too?" "Only those with roots." By dusk, the completed channel reached the swale. Owen stood at the uphill end with a bucket of water. "This feels ceremonial," Tessa said. "It's a bucket. So was that fish before he turned it into plumbing." Owen poured. The water ran through the first stones, hesitated where the old work met the new, then continued around the house. It gathered speed beside the workshop and spilled into the grass below the pine. Ruth watched without smiling. "Again," she said. They poured 3 more buckets. On the 4th, water emerged clear. Owen crouched beside the channel, following it with his eyes. 2 days of muddy work had produced something almost invisible from 10 feet away. No polished surface, no dramatic transformation. Just water going somewhere it could do no harm. Tessa nudged his shoulder with the handle of her shovel. "You're smiling at drainage. I'm cold. Your face doesn't know the difference?" "Limited wiring." Ruth looked toward the house. "Speaking of which, who checked the electrical?" "The utility company disconnected it. That wasn't my question. The former owner believed eye protection was a form of surrender. Ruth muttered something about inherited stupidity and took out her phone. Martin Bell arrived the next morning in a white van with a faded image of a lightning bolt painted on the side. He was a square man in his 60s with close-cropped gray hair, a rigid right knee, and a toolbox so organized Owen felt judged by proximity. Martin stood in the central hall and looked around. "Grant Mercer's house," he said. "Owen Mercer's," Ruth replied. Martin gave Owen a slow inspection. "Temporary condition?" Owen glanced at Ruth. "Does everyone around here greet people like a tax audit?" "Only Mercer's," Martin said. "I'd like to point out that I haven't done anything to you. Your father told the Rotary Club I overcharge widows. Did you?" Martin's eyebrows rose. Owen said, "I'm asking because if I assume my father was lying, I become biased." "He was lying." "Good. That was my working theory." Martin's mouth shifted at one corner, not a smile, but the structure beneath one. He opened the breaker panel and made a low sound. "How bad?" Owen asked. "Your labels are charming." Owen had written, "Dead, probably dead, and do not even think about it," beside the old breakers. "Thank you." "Charm isn't insulation." Martin removed the cover, shone a light inside, and pointed to corrosion along the lower bus bar. Mice had chewed several visible cables. One run disappeared into the north hallway wall. "Nothing gets energized until that's traced," he said. "Not the pump, not the outlets, not a porch light so you can feel civilized. I have one safe outlet." "No, you have one outlet that hasn't hurt you yet." Ruth nodded approvingly. "I like him, you called him." Good judgment confirmed. Martin spent 2 hours inspecting accessible wiring. He marked damaged runs with orange tape, disconnected 3 circuits entirely, and isolated the dining room line. The service entrance was usable, the panel was not. "Replacement plus basic repair," he said, writing figures on the back of one of Grant's old business cards. Owen read the total. "I could buy a small working car for that." "Then buy the car. It won't power the stove. Can we do this in stages? We can make one circuit safe now. Beyond that, I won't attach my name to a fire. I didn't ask you to discount it. You were about to." Owen folded the card. "I was about to ask if you ever trade labor." Martin closed his toolbox. "For what?" "Whatever you need done. I'm an electrician. You're favoring your right knee, your van has a folding walker behind the passenger seat, and the steps to your house have no rail." The last part was a guess. Martin's face confirmed it. Ruth turned away, suddenly interested in the damaged cabinet door. Martin's expression hardened. "You've never seen my house?" "No." "But the walker isn't new, and you carry your tools on the left even though you're right-handed. Means you need the rail on your right going up. If you had one, you'd probably complain less when you unload." Tessa would have told him he had gone too far. Claire would have kicked him under a table. Grant would have kept going until the man either surrendered or left. Owen waited. Martin picked up the toolbox, then set it down again. "My back steps," he said. 5 risers. "Existing handrails loose. I need it removed, the stringer checked, and a rail installed on both sides. Material? I have treated lumber. Inspection and 1 safe circuit." Inspection was already done. "Then why are we bargaining?" Martin stared at him. Ruth coughed into her hand. "1 safe circuit," Martin said. "You do the steps properly, I'll credit the labor toward the panel." "Properly according to who?" "Me? That seems dangerous." "For you, possibly." They shook hands. Owen spent the next day at Martin's small brick house on the western shore. The loose rail came away with 1 pull. The outer stringer had softened where soil touched it, so the job expanded. Martin watched from a kitchen chair near the open door, offering unwanted corrections and coffee every 90 minutes. By evening, Owen's arms ached and both rails stood solid. Martin gripped them, descended 1 step, then another. His right knee barely bent. He reached the ground without turning sideways. "Acceptable," he said. "That's all? You want a parade?" "I'd settle for the coffee story. Wrong old carpenter." Back at Calder, Martin worked until dark. He installed a temporary panel, replaced damaged cable to the dining room, and fitted a covered outlet in the workshop. When he raised the main disconnect, the single lamp Owen had plugged in beside his sleeping bag came on. The bulb was only 40 watts. It threw a weak yellow circle across the scarred floor, and illuminated dust Owen had been happier not seeing. Still, Owen stood in the doorway staring at it. Ruth had returned to watch. She leaned on her cane beside the handmade pegs. "1 circuit," she said. "1 circuit," he agreed. From the kitchen came the slow plink of water entering the ceramic fish. The roof still leaked, the north hall remained unsafe, and nearly every dark room waited for work they could not yet afford. But outside, rain entered the stone channel and moved around the foundation. Inside, the little lamp stayed on. The lamp changed their hours. Until then, darkness had ended the work whether Owen agreed or not. Now, he and Ruth could remain in the central hall after sunset, sorting salvage fasteners, examining joints, and arguing about measurements beneath a circle of yellow light. Ruth distrusted Owen's tape measure. "The hook is loose," she said. "It's supposed to move." "Not that much. It moves the thickness of the hook so inside and outside measurements agree. I know why it moves. Yours has developed personal freedom." She made him test it against her folding rule. His tape was short by 3/16 over 6 feet. "That's nothing," he said. "That is exactly what people say before a door won't close." The cedar beam from the shed needed to be trimmed, planed, and fitted above the kitchen opening. Ruth drew the joint directly on the wood with a pencil, using the framing square that had ridden in her station wagon. "Why not just put it under the steel plate?" Owen asked. "Because then the beam only holds up the plate. The plate needs to transfer the load into the beam." "Those sound like the same thing. They do if you want to redo it." She showed him how to cut a shallow housing at each end so the headers settled over the new posts instead of merely resting on fasteners. Owen made the first cut too deep. Ruth stared at it. "You can say it. I'm deciding which version. The supportive teacher, she died. Quickly, bandsaw." They corrected the cut with a fitted cedar shim. Ruth made him shape it by hand rather than fill the gap with adhesive. "Glue is stronger than wood," he said. "People selling glue say that. People selling wood probably disagree. Wood doesn't need salesmen. It grows." The beam took 3 evenings. Owen could have installed dimensional lumber from the store in half a day, but the old cedar was already paid for, matched the existing frame, and carried a faint pencil line near one end that Ruth refused to sand away. "Leah, 6/12, it read. Owen noticed Ruth touch the writing before they raised the beam. "My mother measured it, she marked it. For this doorway? For one of them. That's vague. It was 38 years ago. Some of us have memories, not filing cabinets." They lifted the beam using 2 temporary supports and a borrowed jack. Ruth handled the jack while Owen guided the end into place. Her left hand slipped once. Metal clanged against the floor, and she swore hard enough to wake Dennis in the walls. "You okay?" Owen asked. "Did it hit you?" "No. Then I'm excellent." She bent to retrieve the jack handle, but Owen reached it first. Ruth's mouth tightened. For 1 second, he thought she might make him put it down so she could pick it up herself. Instead, she said, "Hold it at the middle. My grip turns at the end." They raised the beam together. Once the temporary supports came away, the kitchen opening looked almost unchanged. The new cedar was darker than the old posts and carried fresh plane marks, but the room did not widen or brighten. Nothing dramatic happened. A load that had been traveling badly now traveled well. Owen stood beneath it and pressed both palms to the wood. "You're smiling at structure now," Ruth said. "I'm cold. Limited wiring?" "Exactly." The workshop's single outlet allowed them to take their first joint job. Tessa arrived with 6 wooden dock benches stacked in the marina flatbed. Their legs had loosened, the finish had peeled, and one bore a black scorch mark shaped like the bottom of a portable grill. "People are animals," she said. "Animals don't bring charcoal grills to docks," Owen replied. "That's because they respect water." Ruth inspected the joints and quoted a price. Tessa's eyebrows lifted. "For benches? For not buying 6 new ones?" "I could buy 6 new ones for that." "Then do it." "You're supposed to negotiate." "I did, with the damage." Tessa looked at Owen. "She charges coffee for stories," he said. "You're getting furniture repair." They settled $5 below Ruth's original price, mostly so Tessa could claim movement. The work revealed how much Owen did not know. Hotel maintenance had taught him to make repairs invisible to guests and cheap enough for managers. Ruth cared where grain ended, how water escaped, and whether a joint could be repaired again 10 years later. She rejected 3 of Owen's replacement pieces because the growth rings ran the wrong direction. "It's a bench," he said, "outdoors. People sit on it, near water. They're wearing pants, generally." Then explain what the grain has to do with anything. Ruth did. She drew the curve of growth rings on a board and showed how each piece would cup as it absorbed moisture. Owen listened, resentful until he realized she was right. They repaired the benches over 9 days between other jobs. Tessa sanded 2 of them herself in exchange for a small reduction, filling the workshop with fine dust and music from a radio balanced on the windowsill. She sang badly and without shame. "What is that?" Owen asked. "Fleetwood Mac. I know the song. I mean the emergency happening on top of it." Tessa aimed the sander at him. "I know where you sleep." "Yes, but the dining room door locks now. Not well." She had started bringing food without calling it food. 3 breakfast sandwiches because the marina cook made too many, soup that would otherwise be wasted, half a pie no one could reasonably finish. Ruth accepted everything as payment owed by the universe. Owen argued until Tessa threatened to charge storage. When the benches were completed, their joints were solid, their feet level, and the new oil finish made the old wood glow without disguising its scars. Tessa paid the agreed amount in cash. Ruth divided it on the workbench. "Material," she said, making 1 pile. "Shop expenses, a second. Your labor, mine." Owen looked at his share. "You gave me more. You did more. You priced the job and taught me. That was my labor. You also brought the clamps. Shop expense. You spent half an hour fixing the plane. My mistake for lending you the plane." He slid 2 bills back toward her. Ruth slid them to him again. "If you want charity," she said, "ask your sister. If you want work, learn what yours is worth." The words stayed with him longer than the money. He used his share to pay the electric account deposit and buy insulation for the dining room. Ruth spent hers on replacement blades, coffee, and a used bench vise she bolted to the work table in the same holes where one had once stood. The first evening the house had power beyond the temporary circuit, Owen came back from repairing a cottage gate and found a black sport utility vehicle parked across the drive. Evan stood in the central hall taking pictures with his phone. "What are you doing?" Evan lowered the phone. He wore clean jeans, a quilted vest, and boots that had experienced dirt mainly in promotional photographs. "Claire said you repaired the roof. Part of it. This place is bigger than I remembered. You remembered it from outside. I've been inside." "When?" Evan glanced toward the lake. "Years ago." Ruth was at the workshop sink cleaning brushes. She looked through the doorway and returned to her work without greeting him. Evan photographed the new header. "That original? The beam is. The installation isn't. You pulled it from somewhere? The shed. Good salvage." His approval had the smooth tone he used when leading clients through stage kitchens. "You could lean into that. Original materials, artisan restoration. People love a story if the bathrooms are new." Owen took the phone gently from Evan's hand and lowered it. "Don't photograph my house without asking." Evan's expression altered. "I'm not posting them. That isn't what I said. I wanted to show a client. He likes adaptive properties. The house isn't for a client. Everything's for a client if you need to pay for it." Ruth set down her brush. "That sentence explains your roof lines." Evan looked at her. "Ruth Halpern, Evan Mercer. Dad said you'd retired. Your father said many things when nobody made him show his work." Owen stepped between the 2 doorways. "Can we go outside?" Evan smiled without humor. "You're defending her now?" "I'm asking you not to turn the house into a sales meeting. I'm trying to help. You offered me $5,000 to erase it. I offered you $5,000 because you had no job and no place to live. And now? Now you've spent money you don't have, making a condemned structure look interesting. It isn't condemned, you know what I mean." "No, I know what Dad meant whenever he used a word close enough to the truth." Evan's jaw flexed. For a moment he looked less like Grant than Claire did, younger and tired. "You think I wanted the investment account because it was easy?" he asked. "I'm paying the medical balances. I'm handling the taxes. I'm the one getting calls from people Dad didn't pay. I was getting calls from the man himself at 3 a.m. That was your choice." The sentence silenced the room. Evan seemed to hear it only after speaking. His eyes dropped briefly, but he did not take it back. Owen opened the side door. Evan walked out. At the porch, he tested a repaired board with his boot. "This won't make him grateful," he said. "Who?" "Dad." "Whatever you do here." Owen leaned against the door frame. "He's dead, Evan. I know that." "Do you?" Evan crossed the yard to his vehicle. Before climbing in, he looked back at the house with an expression Owen could not identify. Then the polished SUV moved up the drive, leaving 2 clean tracks through the mud. Ruth resumed cleaning the brushes. You didn't need to provoke him, Owen said. No. Then why did you? He photographs unfinished work. He sells houses. He sells the idea that nobody ever built them. Owen picked up a brush and scraped dried finish from its ferrule. He's good at what he does. I didn't say he wasn't. The defense went nowhere, which annoyed him further. They worked in silence until Ruth asked him to help move the restored benches toward the double doors. As Owen lifted the last one, its rear leg caught in a gap between floorboards. He set it down and knelt. The boards near the north wall did not merely separate. They sloped toward the corner. He placed Ruth's folding rule across them. One end stood nearly an inch above the floor. That wasn't like this last week. Ruth did not answer. Owen looked up. She was staring at the low north wall, her face stripped of every sharp reply. You know what that is, he said. Ruth gripped the edge of the workbench with her damaged hand. Yes, she said. I was hoping I didn't. Ruth made him clear the workshop. Every bench, tool chest, clamp rack, and salvage board had to come away from the north wall. She would not explain while they carried. Owen's questions met the same answer. Not until I can see it. They moved the restored marina benches outside beneath Tessa's tarps. Owen rolled the new vise and work table toward the double doors. When they lifted the last stack of cedar, the floor beneath it showed a narrow crack running across 3 boards. Ruth knelt with difficulty. She pressed her framing square against the floor, checked the slope, then shifted it toward the wall. Her face remained still, but her breathing changed. Bring the jack, she said. Why? We need to look underneath. The crawlspace entrance was outside, half concealed by juniper. Owen had found it during his first inspection and decided the spiders held clear title. He removed the warped cover while Ruth lay on the grass, shining a flashlight into the opening. Damp earth reflected back. The space narrowed toward the north corner, where the hillside pressed close beneath the joists. I'll go, Owen said. I know. You can stay here. I know that too. He pulled on coveralls, gloves, and the respirator he used for mold. Ruth tied a rope around the handle of a tool bag and passed him a light, screwdriver, hammer, level, and folding rule. If I need all this, maybe we should reconsider. If you need more, come back. The crawlspace smelled of soil and old insulation. Owen moved on elbows beneath pipes and electrical lines Martin had marked with orange tape. Every few feet, Ruth called his name, and he answered, irritated until the light from the opening disappeared behind a foundation wall. The joists above the central hall looked dry. Near the workshop, the soil became soft enough for his elbows to sink. He found the first support post under a carrying beam, squared timber resting on a concrete pad. Its surface darkened near the bottom, but resisted the screwdriver. First one's okay, he called. How high is the pad? 6 inches, maybe. Measure. 6 1/4. Keep going. The next post leaned. A wooden shim had split between its top and the beam, opening a gap wide enough for Owen to slide in 2 fingers. This one isn't carrying anything. It was. When? Measure the pad. He dug around it with the screwdriver. There was no concrete edge. The timber disappeared directly into the earth. Owen, Ruth called. It's buried. Silence traveled through the space. He crawled farther. The third post stood at the north corner beneath the sloping floor. Its lower half had softened into dark fibers. When Owen tapped it with the hammer, the sound was not wood, but packed soil. A section came away in his gloved hand. He stopped breathing. Above him, the workshop gave a faint creak. Owen. The corner post is gone. Don't touch anything else. Come out. I can see another one. Come out. Her voice had changed. No sarcasm, no instruction disguised as insult. Fear. He backed through the crawlspace too quickly, snagging his coveralls on a nail and tearing the sleeve. By the time he emerged, his chest was tight and his hair was wet with sweat. Ruth sat beside the opening, with both hands around her cane. How many? Owen asked. I put in 4. You put them in. Yes. Directly in the ground? The pads were supposed to be poured later. He removed the respirator. After what? After we had access from the north side, the concrete truck couldn't get down the slope in spring, then why install the posts? To keep the beam in place while we framed above it, with untreated wood. Ruth looked toward the lake. Owen stood, stripping off his gloves finger by finger. You knew. I knew where they were. You looked at that floor and knew exactly what it was. I hoped Grant had replaced them. You hoped. He told people he had. And Grant was famous for doing what he said? Ruth used the cane to get to her feet. It took 2 attempts. Owen did not help her. The framing schedule was already 6 weeks behind, she said. We'd lost time to weather. Grant bought those posts from a sawmill after I ordered treated material. He said they were temporary. You installed them. Yes. You told me every mistake in this house was him changing materials or stopping work. I never said every. You let me think it. Ruth's damaged hand opened and closed against the cane. I argued with him for 3 days. He said if I wouldn't use what he bought, he'd hire someone who would. I had 4 people on payroll and 2 other clients holding payment until Calder passed its next stage. So you did it. I did. The directness made him angrier than an excuse would have. You knew they would rot. I knew they couldn't stay. But you left, not then. 7 months later. And you never came back to fix them. Grant locked me off the property. He stopped the final 2 payments. He told every supplier between here and town that I'd padded invoices and abandoned an unsafe job. Was it unsafe? Ruth flinched so slightly he might have missed it if he had not been watching for weakness. That corner was, she said. Owen laughed once without humor. There it is. I intended to correct it. People keep telling me what they intended for this house. I should have refused the material. I should have stopped the job. I should have documented the posts and made Grant sign the change. But you didn't. No. He looked at the workshop, at the tarps covering their restored benches, at the beam they had installed in the kitchen. Everything Ruth touched now seemed connected to something she had not told him. Is that why you came back? He asked. You saw my notice and thought the floor was finally about to collapse? I didn't know the posts were still there. Is that why you asked to finish it? One reason. 1. I told you I was afraid the house would prove Grant right. You said that like it was about your reputation. It was about my work. This is your work, yes? Rain from the previous night still glistened in the stone drain they had completed. Owen remembered Ruth sitting on the rocks, correcting the angle of every channel, teaching him not to behave like a machine. How long? He asked. How long before the corner fails? I can't tell until we expose the beam. Guess. A hard storm could move it. Loading the workshop could move it. It may hold another winter. It may not hold through tomorrow. You had me bring 6 benches in there. I didn't see the slope then. You knew the posts existed. I believed they had been replaced, because Grant said so. Ruth absorbed the accusation. No, she said, because I needed to. The honesty struck close enough to hurt. Owen walked into the workshop. The crack looked wider now, although he knew that could be his attention changing rather than the floor. The new bench vise waited near the doors. Ruth's canvas apron hung from a peg on the wall. He took it down. What are you doing? She asked, giving this back. We need to shore the beam first. I'll handle it. You don't know how? I didn't know how to patch a roof either. A roof gives you warning. That corner won't. You can write a list. Owen. He held out the apron. Ruth did not take it. You're angry, she said. Good eye. Be angry after the load is supported. I don't want you working on the house. That isn't a safe decision. Neither was burying 4 untreated posts. Her mouth closed. He carried the apron to her station wagon and laid it on the hood. Ruth followed slowly, favoring her right leg more than usual. Use the jack under the beam, not the joist, she said. Set it on 2 layers of blocking. Don't lift more than 1/8 of an inch. You're supporting, not correcting. I heard you. You need 2 temporary posts before you remove anything. I'm not removing anything. The rotten post can split when the load shifts. I said I heard you. Ruth reached the car and leaned against the door. Grant and I told the story in ways that let each of us survive it, she said. He said I ruined the house. I said he prevented me from building it. The truth is less clean. Owen looked at the boarded lake opening. You had 19 days to tell me. Yes. You talked about my mother. You talked about finishing what she wanted. You let me think you were here for her. I am, and for yourself. Yes. And you thought if you repaired it before I found out, it wouldn't count. Ruth looked older than she had on the broken porch. Not harmless, not forgiven, just older. I thought if I repaired it, she said, the truth might have somewhere sound to stand. Owen opened the driver's door for her because watching her struggle with it would have been cruelty, not victory. I don't need another person improving the explanation after the damage is done. She placed the cane inside, then lowered herself behind the wheel. I'll send the shoring dimensions, she said. Don't. I'm sending them. I won't use them. That will be your mistake, not mine. The station wagon backed up the drive. Ruth did not wave. Owen returned to the workshop and stood over the cracked floor. For several minutes, he did nothing. Anger had made the problem seem clean while Ruth was there. With her gone, it became wood, weight, wet soil, and a section of house that might shift without consulting his sense of betrayal. He dragged the jack from the central hall. The salvage posts Ruth had set aside were long enough for temporary supports. He found 2 thick planks for blocking, checked them for rot, and carried everything to the crawl space. He did not need her. The first layer of blocking went down flat. The second rocked slightly. Owen packed soil beneath one corner with the heel of his glove until it stopped moving. He positioned the jack below the beam, tightened it by hand, and watched the steel head rise. At contact, the handle became stiff. 1/8 of an inch, Ruth had said. He pumped once. Above him, something cracked. Owen froze. Dust drifted through the flashlight beam. The sound did not repeat. He backed away and crawled outside, telling himself the jack had ceded, nothing more. In the workshop, the floor had not moved. The wall still stood. The crack across the boards was unchanged. His phone vibrated on the workbench. A message from Ruth contained 3 dimensions and a drawing of the shoring position. Owen deleted it without opening the image. Then he took the bench cushions into the dining room, laid them beside his sleeping bag, and closed the workshop doors. That night the wind rose from the lake. Each gust pressed against the boarded opening and made the north wall answer with a low wooden complaint. Owen lay beneath the single lamp, listening. The sound was not loud. That made it worse. By morning, the jack had tilted. Not much. The steel column stood perhaps half an inch off vertical, but the blocking beneath it had pressed into the damp soil on one side. Owen lay in the crawl space comparing it to a joist and felt his stomach contract. He backed out without touching the handle. Martin answered on the 4th ring. If a jack shifts under load, Owen said, how worried should someone be? How theoretical is this someone? Moderately. Is it under a car? A beam. Martin was silent. House beam? He asked. Workshop. Get out from under it. I am out. Stay out. Owen sat on the grass beside the crawlspace entrance while Martin questioned him. Soil condition, type of jack, size of blocking, height to the beam, amount lifted. I didn't lift it, Owen said. I supported it. How much? 1 pump. That's lifting. Ruth said 1/8 of an inch. Ruth was there? No. Another silence, different this time. I have cribbing, Martin said. You can borrow it. What about another jack? I have one. Can you help me set it? I can bring equipment. I'm not a foundation contractor. Neither is Ruth. Ruth has kept more buildings standing than most foundation contractors have seen. Owen dug his thumb into the wet grass. Just bring the cribbing. Martin arrived with heavy squared timbers stacked in the van. He did not ask what had happened until they had built 2 interlocking towers beneath the workshop beam, one on each side of the failing post. Then he stood in the yard, stretching his stiff knee. Where is she? He asked. Not here. I've observed that. We disagreed. About gravity? About the post. Martin waited. Owen hated how silence seemed to become a local trade skill. She installed it, he said, untreated, directly in the ground. Martin looked toward the workshop. When? During the original build. Temporary post? That never got replaced. Grant, Ruth too. Martin nodded once. He did not defend her. She told you? After the floor moved. That late. Yes. Martin leaned against his van. You want me to say she had reasons? No, she did. I said I don't want that. Good. Because reasons aren't repairs. Martin closed the rear doors. Do not lift the beam alone, he said. Do not remove the old post. If the cribbing sinks, leave the workshop and call someone. Someone. You know her number. Owen did not answer. For the next week, he worked everywhere except his own house. He repaired a torn screen porch, replaced hinges on a boathouse door, and spent a full day tracing a leak that turned out to be water following a cable through an improperly sealed wall. Each job was simple enough to complete without Ruth and complicated enough to remind him of her. He heard her voice when he selected lumber. Check the end grain when he set a ladder. That shrub is not structural. When a gate closed smoothly on the first try, he nearly turned to make some remark and felt foolish to find nobody beside him. Tessa noticed his mood, but did not ask about it until she came for the benches. They loaded 5 into the marina truck. The 6th remained near the workshop doors, its back rail missing. "Where's the piece Ruth was shaping?" Tessa asked. "She took her tools." "The rail was her tool. She took the template." Tessa studied him. "What did you do? Why does everyone assume I did something?" "Experience." Owen told her enough. He expected Ruth's history with the town to work in his favor. Instead, Tessa tightened a strap over the benches and said, "That sounds bad. It is bad. I meant the post. I also meant the post." "Did Ruth apologize?" "She admitted it. That wasn't my question. She said she should have refused the material. Then she tried to stay and fix it. Very Ruth. That doesn't make it okay." "No." Tessa pulled the strap tight. "You want me to tell you she's terrible so you can stop missing her?" "I don't miss her." "Then I'm glad we avoided that." She climbed into the truck. "What about the 6th bench?" Owen asked. "Keep it until the rail's done." "I don't have the template. Sounds like a problem for 2 adults with phones." She drove away before he could explain that phones could also be used to avoid adults. The envelope appeared on the side step that evening, protected from rain beneath the overturned chair Ruth had used for her coat. Inside was an itemized account of every hour she had worked at Calder, every mile driven, every clamp and tool supplied, and her share of the bench payment. The total would have taken Owen months to pay. Across the final line, Ruth had written, "Paid in full." Behind the account was a single sheet. "I knew the posts were temporary. I did not know they remained. I should have told you before I entered the house, not after it forced me to. I'm sorry." There was no request to return, no explanation about Grant, payroll, weather, or Leah. Owen read the note 3 times and put it in the kitchen drawer beside the expired hot sauce. 5 minutes later, he took it out and placed it on the workbench. After dark, he moved it to the dining room, where it remained visible beneath the lamp. The storm arrived 2 nights later. The forecast had called for rain and gusts, nothing unusual for the lake. At 11, wind struck the lakeside wall hard enough to shake dust from the ceiling. Owen got up, dressed, and checked every room. Water moved correctly through the stone drain. The roof patch held. Tessa's tarp snapped over the stacked cedar, their ropes straining but secure. In the workshop, the north wall groaned. Owen shone his flashlight along the floor. The crack had widened. One tower of cribbing no longer touched the beam. He went outside to inspect the wall and nearly lost the door when the wind caught it. Rain hit sideways. The plywood over the unfinished lakeside opening flexed inward between screws. Owen braced one shoulder against it and felt the whole panel pulse. He could call Martin. He could call Ruth. Instead, he dragged 2 long boards from the workshop and tried to brace the plywood from inside. The first slipped across the wet floor. The second caught between the panel and a floor beam, but each gust drove it deeper, turning the brace into a lever against the sloping corner. The floor dropped with a blunt wooden thud. Owen fell to one knee. The bench vise rolled 6 inches and stopped against the wall. For a moment, the house went quiet beneath the wind. Then the remaining cribbing took the load with a series of small cracks. Owen left the workshop. He closed the double doors and wedged them from the hall. There was nothing else he could do safely. He sat in the dining room with the lamp on, listening to rain and waiting for the next sound. The north wall held through the night. At dawn, it stood visibly lower. Tessa arrived before 7 with a chainsaw, 2 coils of rope, and Wally in the truck cab. She took one look at the workshop and shut off the engine. "You all right?" "Yes." "That answer available in a version where you look at me?" Owen looked at her. "Yes." She walked the wall, examined the buckled siding, then stepped into the workshop. The floor sloped enough that a loose pencil rolled toward the north corner. "Did you call her?" Tessa asked. "No." "Did you call anyone?" "No." She nodded. "Then this isn't about the post anymore." "I know." Tessa picked up the pencil and placed it on the workbench. "Ruth works above the old feed store on Franklin. Blue door in the alley. I have her number. I didn't tell you where her phone lives." He drove into town after securing the workshop doors. The old feed store had become an antique mall at street level. Ruth's blue door opened onto a narrow staircase that smelled of dust and machine oil. At the top, Owen found a workshop crowded with more tools than the floor. Cabinet doors hung from ceiling racks. Planes and chisels filled shallow drawers. A half-restored dining table occupied the center, forcing him to turn sideways between it and the wall. Ruth sat on a stool fitting a dovetail into a drawer corner. She wore magnifying glasses and held the chisel in a grip altered around her missing fingertips. She saw him and returned to the joint. "The corner moved," Owen said. "How much? About an inch? Anyone hurt?" "No." "Good." She made one careful cut. "I deleted your drawing," he said. "That was stupid." "Yes." "You lifted the beam?" "One pump." "That was also stupid." "Yes." Ruth removed the magnifying glasses. Owen set her note on the table. It was folded into quarters and softened from his pocket. "You were wrong not to tell me. I know. I was wrong to think being angry meant I could ignore what you knew." Ruth waited. "I don't forgive you because the storm scared me," he said. "And I'm not asking you back so you can erase it. That's sensible. I'm asking because I can't do this alone. I don't want any more hidden mistakes. Not yours, not Dad's, not mine. If something is bad, you tell me before you fix it. If we can't afford it, we say that. No promises that depend on somebody becoming a different person later." Ruth's eyes moved over his face. "And no heroics," he added. "You don't pretend your hands can do what they can't. I don't pretend a phone call is surrender. That last one seems ambitious." "I'm trying." Ruth stood and reached for her cane. "My tools are already packed," she said. "Of course they are. I saw the weather. You could have called. You told me not to." They faced each other across the crowded shop, both holding enough truth to remain offended. "I'm sorry," Ruth said. This time there was no sentence after it. Owen nodded. "So am I." Back at Calder, Ruth walked directly to the workshop corner. She looked at the dropped floor, the displaced brace, and the single cribbing tower carrying the beam. Then she handed Owen her cane and lowered herself carefully to the ground beside the crawlspace opening. "First," she said, "we undo what you did." Undoing it took the rest of the morning. Owen crawled beneath the beam, while Ruth remained outside with a level and a flashlight. He released the jack a fraction at a time. Each turn made the steel complain. "Quarter turn," Ruth called. "That was a quarter. That was half. You can't see my hand. I can hear your impatience." When the jack came free, they pulled it out by rope. The shifted cribbing remained under the beam until Ruth could arrange more support. She would not let Owen touch the rotten post. Nothing comes out until something better is ready to take its place. You say that about wood or people? Wood listens. Ruth made 4 phone calls. The first person had a foundation crew booked through July. The second no longer worked near the lake because, according to Ruth, he had discovered golf and lost his character. The third was one of her former apprentices, Denise Coe, who arrived after lunch in a mud-spattered truck with a concrete mixer strapped in the bed. Denise was 50, compact, and wore her black hair clipped so tightly that it seemed to pull her eyebrows upward. She hugged Ruth with one arm, then held her away and examined her. "You look terrible. You look expensive. I am expensive." Denise turned to Owen. "You the mercer who owns it or the one who sells everything?" "The disappointing one. That doesn't narrow a family." Ruth pointed toward the crawl space. Denise spent 40 minutes underneath. When she emerged, her coveralls were soaked at both elbows, and her expression was calmer than Owen found reassuring. "The main beam's sound," she said. "Joist ends have surface rot at the corner. 4 bad supports. 1 failed completely. Soil's saturated, but the drain should help if it stays clear." "What does it need?" Owen asked. "Temporary shoring across the full workshop span. Remove the bad posts. Excavate footings below the soft layer. Pour reinforced pads. New treated posts with steel bases, kept above concrete." "How long?" "Concrete needs time. We support now, dig tomorrow, pour the day after if the holes stay dry. Posts after cure. And cost?" Denise looked at Ruth. "Look at him," Ruth said. "I don't own his wallet." Denise named an amount. Owen almost laughed. "For 4 posts? For the equipment, material, and 3 people who know what happens if we lift the wrong side first. What if it's 2 people? Then it costs the same and takes longer. What if I'm the 3rd? It costs less if you follow directions." "How much less?" Denise named another amount. It was still nearly everything Owen had saved toward interior flooring and a used masonry stove insert. Ruth said, "The joist can wait." Denise shook her head. "Not the corner one. We can sister it." "With what?" "The cedar in the shed. That cedar is too valuable to hide under a floor." Owen looked between them. "This is where one of you explains why value matters more than my house staying up." Denise smiled. "He is Leah's. Ruth's face closed slightly. You knew her too? Owen asked. Not well. She brought lunch to job sites and made Ruth eat it. That doesn't mean she knew me. It means she knew Ruth. Denise returned to her truck to calculate material. Owen followed Ruth into the central hall. I can't afford this and the floors, he said. You can't install floors over a failed corner. I know that. You said no hidden damage. This is the price of that agreement. Convenient that integrity has a price after I spent the money. Ruth leaned her cane against the new cedar header. I'll cover half. No, I owe more than half. No. This isn't charity. It isn't payment either. Your bill said paid in full. That was for the work I did. These posts are work I failed to do. 38 years ago. Wood doesn't care when the mistake was made. Owen looked toward the workshop. The single bench visible through the door tilted toward the wall. If you pay, he said, you become the person who saved the house. I don't want that. You came here to finish it. I came here believing that would make something simple. I was wrong. He waited. Ruth took a breath. Let me pay for the replacement posts and steel bases. Not labor, not concrete. The material I should have refused then. It was a smaller amount, specific. Harder to misunderstand. Put it in the job account, he said. Write down exactly what it's for. Agreed. And Denise gives me the discounted number if I work. Denise gives you the discounted number if she doesn't kill you. From the yard, Denise called. That is accurate. They built the shoring wall before sunset. Martin brought a second jack and stayed to help, although his knee prevented him from crawling below. Tessa closed the marina early and arrived with sandwiches, work lights, and no questions about Owen's visit to the blue door. Ruth assigned roles. Denise and Owen worked beneath the beam. Martin monitored the level from the workshop. Tessa cut blocking to Denise's measurements. Ruth stood where she could see everyone, calling out changes in load and stopping them whenever the wood made a sound she disliked. They raised the dropped corner an eighth of an inch at a time. Hold, Martin called. Both jacks stopped. Ruth checked the floor. Again. The work became a rhythm of pressure and waiting. Pump. Hold. Measure. Listen. The floor rose slowly enough to appear motionless. Owen's shoulders cramped from lying beneath the jack handle. Mud soaked through his coveralls and found the small of his back. After the fifth lift, a joist cracked. Everyone froze. Surface split, Denise said after examining it. No movement. Ruth closed her eyes for 1 second. Continue, she said. They did not restore the floor to level. Ruth would not risk forcing old framing back to a position it had abandoned over years. They lifted until the beam carried evenly across the temporary wall, and the corner no longer moved under weight. Owen climbed out after dark. Tessa handed him a sandwich. You look like the ground rejected you. The ground and I have creative differences. You call her? He bit into the sandwich. That's private? So, yes. You could have told me she worked above the feed store before I made a fool of myself. I did tell you. After. You didn't ask before. This town is exhausting. You're adapting. The excavation began the next morning. Owen and Denise dug the first footing by hand because machinery could not fit beneath the house. They filled buckets with wet soil and dragged them out by rope. Ruth inspected every layer. At 20 inches, Denise struck compacted gravel. That's our bearing, she said. The original posts ended 10 inches above it. Owen sat back on his heels. They weren't even close. No, Ruth said from the opening. She did not defend herself. She did not explain the weather or the schedule. The restraint mattered more than Owen wanted it to. They formed the pads, tied reinforcing steel, and poured concrete through a chute assembled from old gutter sections. The work consumed 3 days and most of Owen's flooring savings. Each receipt went into a coffee tin on the workbench. Ruth recorded every expense on the yellow pad. When she bought the steel post bases, she placed her receipt in the tin without comment. During the concrete cure, they finished Tessa's 6th bench. Ruth set the old template on the work table. Owen traced the curve, chose a board with grain running the right direction, and shaped the replacement rail. Ruth watched him test the fit. Well, he asked, take another shaving from the left shoulder. It closes. It closes because you're forcing it. It's outdoor furniture. People wear pants. I remember. He shaved the shoulder. The joint seated with hand pressure. Ruth nodded. That was all. It felt like praise. They delivered the bench to the marina late in the afternoon. Tessa placed it at the end of the longest dock, facing the open lake rather than the fuel pumps. "You didn't test it 11 times, Owen said. "I trust the grain." Ruth snorted and continued back toward the truck. Tessa sat. Owen joined her, leaving a respectful space between them. The dock moved gently beneath their weight. "You could have taken the 5,000, Tessa said. He looked at her. "How do you know about that?" "Evan talks when he thinks people are impressed." "To who?" "Everyone." That's how talking works for Evan. Owen watched a fishing boat cross the far end of the lake. "Some mornings, I think I should have. 5,000's gone quickly. So is everything else. That house makes money nervous." He smiled. "Ruth says it was supposed to produce something. What does it produce now?" "Mold. Besides that." He considered the repaired benches along the dock, Martin's handrails, the gate that closed cleanly. "Work," he said. Tessa's shoulder touched his when the dock shifted. Neither moved away. When the concrete had cured enough, Denise returned with a second former apprentice of Ruth's, Lionel Price, a quiet carpenter with forearms like split logs and a habit of humming while he measured. The new posts went in on steel bases. The joist at the corner received a cedar sister cut from the shed beam Denise had called too valuable. Owen hesitated before making the first cut. "Once it's under there, nobody sees it," he said. Ruth rested her hand on the cedar. "It isn't less valuable because it disappears." Together, they lifted it into place. The temporary shoring came down on a clear morning. Denise loosened each support while Martin watched the level. The repaired beam accepted the load without a crack or shudder. Owen walked the workshop floor. A pencil placed near the north wall remained where he set it. Denise presented the final invoice. It was painful, honest, and exactly the amount promised. "You did good work," she told Owen. "He takes instruction poorly," Ruth said. "He takes it eventually. Slow teaching is expensive." Denise hugged Ruth again before leaving. Lionel shook Owen's hand and told him to call if the floor began speaking in complete sentences. The workshop felt enormous without the shoring. Owen moved the work table back beneath the windows. Ruth rehung her canvas apron on its peg, but did not put tools into it until he nodded. Near noon, 2 vehicles came down the drive. Claire's silver sedan stopped beside the porch. Evan parked behind her in his black SUV. A third person, a woman Owen did not recognize, stepped from the passenger side holding a leather portfolio. Evan looked at the repaired roof, the cleared drain, and the open workshop doors. Then he smiled at the stranger as though the house had performed on cue. "See," he said, "the bones were always there." Owen walked across the yard before Evan could begin the tour. "Who is this?" The woman with the portfolio extended a hand. "Mallory Pike." He shook it because she had not done anything yet. "Mallory operates 3 executive rental properties," Evan said. "She's looking for something on the water with more character." Mallory glanced at the missing siding, the tarped cedar, and the workshop windows cloudy with dust. "It certainly has that. You brought a rental client into my house without asking. She isn't a client yet. That improves nothing." Evan gave him the patient smile he used in front of strangers. "I texted you. My phone was under a house. You could have answered afterward. I didn't agree beforehand." Mallory lowered the portfolio. "I may have misunderstood. Evan said the property was available for a possible management arrangement. It isn't." "Not even when it's finished?" Evan asked. Owen looked at him. "It's not yours to offer. I offered a conversation. You offered a tour." Claire came around the hood of her sedan. She wore old jeans and carried 2 empty plastic bins. "I told him this was a bad idea," she said. "You came with him," Owen replied. "I did not. He followed me from the highway." Evan spread his hands. "We're all standing in mud for different reasons. Can we not make Mallory regret having a schedule? She should regret coming without permission." Mallory's eyes moved from brother to brother. "I do, actually." Evan's smile slipped. "I'm sorry, Owen," she said. "I wouldn't have come if I understood the situation." She shook his hand again, this time as a departure, and walked to Evan's SUV. Evan followed her halfway. "Mallory, give me 2 minutes. I'll wait in the car." The passenger door closed with expensive quiet. Ruth stood in the workshop doorway, arms folded over her canvas apron. Evan pointed toward her. "He's running a business here. Not yours," Ruth said. "I'm not talking to you. You were talking about the building. It talks back through me." "Of course it does." Owen stepped between them. Take Mallory wherever you told her you were taking her. I told her I had access to a promising property. You don't. We are family. You remember that after the roof stopped leaking. Evan's face reddened. You think I'm trying to steal your house? I think you walked into it with a camera, then came back with someone who makes money from houses she doesn't own. That is called management. That is called leaving. Claire set the bins on the ground. Both of you lower your voices. They ignored her. Evan looked toward the repaired workshop wall. Do you know what it will cost to make this commercially usable? Fire separation, plumbing, parking, insurance. You're taking handyman jobs and pouring everything into a structure that still looks abandoned. It isn't a commercial rental. Then, how does it pay for itself? Work. What happens when your back gives out? When Ruth can't climb the stairs? When winter cuts your jobs in half? The questions were not wrong. Owen hated him for bringing them in Mallory's car. I'll figure it out. That has been your financial plan since you were 20. Owen moved closer. Claire caught his arm. Stop! He looked down at her hand until she released him. Evan's eyes flickered toward the workshop. I was offering an income stream. You want to punish me because the property turned out better than I thought. It didn't turn out better. We made it better. And now you need to use what you made. I am? By repairing benches. Those benches paid for the electric deposit. Evan stared at him, and something in his expression became almost sad. You don't know what scale is, he said. You don't know what enough is. The words landed between them. Evan looked away first. He returned to the SUV, climbed in beside Mallory, and reversed up the drive too quickly. His tires threw gravel across the grass. Claire watched him leave. That went well. Owen turned to the empty bins. What are those for? Her mouth tightened. There are things in the house I want. Things you called contaminated. I called the upholstered furniture contaminated. Because it is. What do you want? Mom's blue mixing bowl, the brass candlesticks, the little maple table from the upstairs hall if it isn't ruined. This house doesn't have an upstairs. You know which table. He did. It stood in the dining room beneath the single lamp, holding Ruth's apology and Owen's phone charger. Leah had kept letters in its shallow drawer. The estate agreement says the contents came with the property. Claire's eyes cooled. I'm not making a legal claim. No. You brought bins. I left everything here because I thought it was destroyed. It was easier when nothing looked worth taking. That isn't fair. Neither was the division. You agreed to it. Because you both expected me to sell. We expected you to survive. By disappearing conveniently. Claire picked up one of the bins. Do you want every object in this house because you love it, or because you don't want Evan and me to have it? Owen opened his mouth and stopped. Ruth stepped back into the workshop, giving them privacy without pretending not to hear. Claire continued toward the side door. Owen followed. You can't just take things, I asked. You arrived with containers. I know how you answer questions when you feel cornered. That doesn't make bringing containers less aggressive. It means I know my brother. Inside, Claire paused beneath the cedar header. She touched Leah's faint pencil line. What is that? Mom marked the beam. Claire leaned closer. For a moment she looked defenseless. Ruth told you that. Yes. And you believe her? I believe Mom's handwriting. Claire traced the numbers without touching them. Dad said she picked paint colors. He made it sound like the house was his project. Ruth says the layout was Mom's. Ruth says many things. So did Dad. Claire's gaze sharpened. You knew him at the end. That doesn't mean you knew him completely. I knew enough. No. You knew the version who needed you. The cruelty in the sentence surprised them both. Claire looked down. I didn't mean you did. I meant he depended on you. It changed how you saw everything before. It should have changed how you saw him, too. Claire lifted the empty bin like a shield. I came when I could. You came on Sundays, checked his pillbox, and reorganized mail I'd already opened. I was keeping the practice alive. I know. You say that, like it absolves me and condemns me at the same time. Owen glanced toward the kitchen. The ceramic fish sat beneath a leak that had slowed to one drop every few minutes. Where are Mom's kitchen boxes? Claire did not answer immediately. What boxes? He asked. I packed some things after she died. Her copper pans, the yellow dishes, utensils. Dad wanted the counters cleared. You have them? They're in my basement. All this time, they're safe. Bring them back. Claire's face closed. This kitchen is damp. It's getting repaired. When it's dry. You came to take a table out of the same house. The table is finished wood. The pans are copper. That isn't the point. No. The point is, you get to decide what I can take care of. Claire picked up the blue mixing bowl from a lower shelf. Dust coated its rim. She held it against her chest. Mom gave this to me. She let you borrow it for a Thanksgiving. She said I should keep it, then take it. Claire's surprise irritated him. I don't want every object, Owen said. I want you to stop treating me like the bad weather. She looked down at the bowl. The maple table stays, he added. I use it. For what? My phone charger. A small laugh escaped her before she could stop it. Owen smiled despite himself, and the anger shifted without disappearing. Claire placed the bowl carefully in the bin. She took the candlesticks, but left the table. Before leaving, she walked through the workshop with Ruth. You said Mom wanted this room first, Claire said. Yes. Why? She believed useful things should have a room before decorative ones. Claire looked around at the planes, clamps, repaired doors, and cedars stacked beneath the windows. That doesn't sound like her. It may not sound like who she became. What changed? Ruth glanced toward Owen, then back at Claire. A house isn't the only thing altered by the person paying for it. Claire flinched. That sounds rehearsed, she said. It's had 38 years. Claire carried her bin to the sedan. At the driver's door, she told Owen to send photographs when the kitchen was dry. I'll decide for myself. Then you won't get the yellow dishes. You just proved my point. She drove away with the blue bowl visible through the clear plastic. Owen returned to the workshop. Ruth was setting the framing square against a section of the unfinished Lakeside opening. You didn't need to say that to Claire, he said. Which part? About Dad changing Mom. I didn't say Grant. You pointed at the person paying. Leah changed too. People aren't lumber. Pressure doesn't only bend them one direction. What happened between the three of you? Ruth made a pencil mark. That question is getting heavier. So, answer before it falls through a floor. She set down the pencil. Your mother wanted a house where people could come when their lives stopped working, she said. Friends between marriages, people changing jobs, someone caring for a partner who was ill. Grant heard failure in every version of need. He wanted a place that proved the Mercers had succeeded. Which one did you build? We built both until we couldn't. It was not the whole answer, but it was more than she had given before. The repaired foundation allowed the rest of the work to move. Owen and Ruth insulated the dining room, restored the pantry shelves, and reopened the original stove flue. Martin installed the workshop circuits against the debt Owen earned by repairing trim and replacing a sagging exterior door at his house. Tessa sent customers. Denise referred 2 more. The coffee tin on the bench became 3 tins marked Material, Tax, and Eat. Ruth added the last label. I know how food works, Owen said. Your refrigerator contains mustard and a screw. The screw is unrelated. The first frost silvered the stone drain before the masonry stove was ready. Owen slept in a wool cap and woke to ice inside the kitchen windows. Jobs slowed with the weather. Every purchase became an argument between survival and progress. They spent the money saved for finished floors on a refurbished stove insert and used mismatched boards from the north rooms to patch the dining room. The result looked assembled rather than designed. Ruth called it honest. Owen called it what they could afford. On the evening they lit the stove for the first time, smoke backed into the room, setting off Martin's new detector and sending everyone outside coughing. Historic warmth, Tessa said. Ruth blamed the cold flue. Martin blamed the chimney cap. Owen blamed houses with opinions. They corrected the draft and tried again. This time, the fire drew upward. Heat moved slowly into the stone hearth and remained after the flames settled. Owen stood close enough to warm his hands while Ruth checked the joints and Martin pretended not to enjoy being right about the cap. Tessa carried in a pot of soup. You made too much? Owen asked. No, I made exactly this much. They ate at a work table in the central hall. The room still had exposed framing along one wall. The lakeside opening remained covered in mismatched boards. Wind found gaps around the windows, and everyone kept their coats nearby. Yet the stove held. Halfway through dinner, headlights crossed the plywood over the lake wall. Owen looked toward the drive, expecting Evan. Claire entered carrying 4 sealed boxes. She set them beside the kitchen doorway. The copper pans are on top, she said. The yellow dishes are wrapped in towels. Owen put down his spoon. Claire rubbed warmth back into her hands and looked toward the stove. Is there enough soup? She asked. Or do I need to bring my own bowl? Claire stayed for soup. She sat between Martin and Tessa, still wearing her coat, while Ruth found one of the yellow bowls and washed it at the workshop sink. Claire watched as though the bowl might accuse her of improper storage. "You could have used the blue one," Owen said. "I brought it back too. It was yours." "I know." The answer sounded like surrender and irritation in equal measure. Tessa passed her the bread. "You run the accounting office?" "It's an accounting practice." "What's the difference?" "About $40 an hour." Martin laughed into his soup. Claire looked surprised, then pleased. Conversation moved around her at first. Martin complained about the stove manufacturer. Tessa described a marina customer who had attempted to winterize an engine with cooking oil. Ruth asked whether the oil had been extra virgin. Owen kept expecting Claire to look around the unfinished central hall and see only expense. Instead, she asked how they tracked jobs. Owen pointed toward the 3 coffee tins. Claire set down her spoon. "No." "They're labeled." "No." Ruth's handwriting is very clear. Material, tax, and eat are not accounts. They contain money. That makes it worse. Ruth tore bread in half. I knew bringing her in would ruin dinner. Claire spent the next hour at the work table with Grant's old notebook, a stack of receipts, and an expression of personal injury. She discovered that Owen had recorded income, but not mileage, that Ruth had deducted material twice on one bench repair, and then corrected it by putting cash directly into the tax tin, and that nobody could explain a $7 receipt for marine lubricant. "Tessa," Owen said, "it was for the gate." "Why does a wooden gate need marine lubricant?" Claire asked. "Because it's near water." Claire pressed both hands to her face. When she lowered them, she was laughing. The sound transformed her. It was Leah's laugh, or close enough to make Owen look away. Claire returned the following Sunday with a laptop and a portable printer. She created a simple bookkeeping system, then refused payment until Ruth threatened to report the free labor as an unrecorded contribution. "You don't know what that means," Claire said. "I know it upsets you." They settled on an exchange. Claire handled the books. Owen repaired a rotted railing at the office and replaced the scratched walnut frame around Grant's certificate with the original one Claire had stored in a closet. "You kept it," he said when she handed it over. "It didn't match." "That isn't why you kept it." "No." He refinished the scratched corner, but left a shallow dent Grant had made while moving offices years earlier. Claire ran her finger over it after he rehung the certificate. "Dad always said Evan did that. He blamed Evan for everything involving momentum. He blamed you for anything involving delay, and you for anything involving questions." Claire smiled faintly. "We were efficiently assigned." At Calder, she became useful without becoming in charge, a distinction that required practice from both of them. She questioned the price of every job and made Owen raise his labor rate. He accused her of turning neighbors into clients. She pointed out that neighbors also required food, electricity, and taxes. The tax tin emptied into a bank account. The eat tin remained because Ruth liked it. Winter narrowed their work, but widened the house's purpose. People began bringing damaged things inside, rather than asking Owen to travel icy roads. A split dining chair, a lamp with cloth wiring, a paddle chewed by somebody's dog, a portable heater Martin condemned on sight. One Saturday, 6 people arrived within an hour. Ruth turned the central room into an improvised repair floor, assigning tables by problem. "If you know how to fix it, show the owner," she said. "If you don't become confident near electricity." Tessa wrote "Repair Day" on a sheet of cardboard and leaned it beside the door. Claire added suggested prices. Owen crossed them out and wrote, "Pay what you can or trade something useful." Claire put the prices back in smaller numbers. The argument became their system. The room Leah had designed for work filled with adults leaning over broken objects. Martin taught a marina mechanic to replace a lamp cord. Denise showed a restaurant owner how to re-glue a chair rung without filling the joint with hardware store adhesive. Ruth sharpened tools at the workbench, her damaged hand controlling the blade through a wooden jig Owen built for her. Tessa kept coffee hot on the stove and sang badly enough to discourage loitering. Not everything could be saved. Ruth made people hear that, honestly. A rotted stool became firewood. A cracked space heater went to recycling. A warped tabletop remained warped, because flattening it would have removed half its thickness. "Repair isn't pretending damage never happened," she told its owner. "It's deciding what the thing can still be." Owen caught Claire watching him when Ruth said it. He pretended not to. The north rooms progressed one paycheck at a time. Owen repaired the joists and installed plain plank floors rather than the finished oak he once imagined. One room became storage. Another held a bed Martin no longer needed, and a dresser Denise traded for labor. When a seasonal marina mechanic lost his lease during a furnace failure, he stayed there for 2 weeks, paying in engine work and groceries. The room did what Leah intended without ceremony. By the time snow softened at the edges of the stone drain, the house had stopped feeling like a project performed against Grant. It demanded too much daily attention to remain symbolic. Evan did not visit. He sent Claire questions about insurance and taxes. He sent Owen 2 listings for used commercial sinks without explanation. He referred one client who needed porch repair, then told the client not to mention his name. Owen recognized the referral anyway because the man opened with, "Your brother says you're stubborn but competent." "That's practically affection," Tessa said. From Evan, "It's a marriage proposal." The client paid promptly. Evan finally returned during a repair day in March. His SUV stopped behind 3 muddy trucks and Martin's van. He entered through the side door while Owen was showing a retired nurse how to tighten the loose frame of a sewing cabinet. Evan stood in the central hall, taking in the tables, the tools, and strangers drinking coffee from mismatched mugs. "You're running events now?" "It's Saturday," Owen said. "That wasn't my question. It's the answer I have today." Ruth looked up from the sharpening bench. "Careful. That may be habit forming." Evan ignored her. Claire sat near the stove with her laptop open, entering payments. "You're part of this?" he asked her. "I do the books." "For free?" "For railing." His expression tightened. "So, everyone gets to use the place except me." Owen handed the nurse a screwdriver. "Turn that quarter turn and test the drawer." Evan waited until she moved to another table. "I asked you about a management arrangement," he said. "You offered one to somebody else. I tried to create value. There was value. You didn't recognize the shape." "Oh, for God's sake." Evan lowered his voice, aware of the people nearby. "You're doing exactly what Dad did, turning the house into proof that your way of living is morally superior." Owen felt the accusation enter the part of him that had no immediate defense. "I fix things," he said, "and make sure everyone sees how little you charge. People pay." "Not enough," Claire told me. Claire looked up. "I said the rates were improving. You also said he'll need another $12,000 for plumbing and insulation. That was private. I'm family." Owen set down the screwdriver. "Which is it, Evan? Are you family, or are you here to evaluate the business? I can be both. Not if family only appears when the numbers improve." Evan glanced around the room. "These people can come in, use the tools, sit at Mom's table. It isn't Mom's table. Everything becomes yours when that helps, and hers when that helps." The words sharpened every sound around them. Tessa turned down the radio. Martin found a reason to inspect a cord at the far table. Claire closed the laptop. "We left him a liability," she said. Evan looked at her. "Don't. We did. We valued the house at land minus demolition because that made the division easy." He agreed. "So did we." "You took the practice," Evan said. "Don't rewrite yourself as generous." "I'm not. And I took the account with every debt attached. Do either of you know what was actually left after medical balances and taxes?" Owen did not. He realized he had never asked. Evan gave the number. It was less than half the figure in Claire's original folder. "I didn't walk away rich," he said. "I spent months cleaning up things Dad didn't tell us. But I don't get to turn that into a beautiful story because bank transfers don't have cedar beams." The anger left Owen without leaving him calm. "You're right," he said. Evan seemed unprepared. "I don't know what you handled," Owen continued. "You didn't know what I handled. We used that to make each other smaller." Claire stared at the closed laptop. Evan's mouth worked before sound came. "Then let me help." "With what?" "The business? The property? I have clients who would pay to use the lake rooms. We could brand the place properly. Mercer House, Calder Works, whatever you want. I bring bookings and capital. Claire runs accounts. You and Ruth handle restoration, family equity. Equity in my house. Shared upside. There it is. You said I could help. I asked what you meant." Evan looked toward Claire. "You can't honestly think this is unfair." Claire rubbed one thumb over the edge of her laptop. "I think you want ownership before you risk belonging," she said. He recoiled as if she had struck him. "You've been here every week." "Yes." "So you get to belong." I came with boxes to take things. Owen and I nearly tore each other apart in the kitchen. You brought the boxes back. Eventually, Evan turned to Owen. What do you want from me? The room waited, though everyone pretended to work. Owen could have named the roof, the hospital calls, the mornings Grant fell, the $5,000 offer. He could have demanded an apology detailed enough to fail. Come as my brother, he said. Not as a partner, not with a client. Come through the door and ask what needs doing. And then what? I earn a chair? No. You sit in one. Evan looked at the occupied tables. You make it sound simple. It isn't. Nothing with you is, probably inherited. For 1 second, Evan almost smiled. Then he saw Ruth watching, and the moment closed. I don't know how to do this, he said. Owen nodded toward a small stool with one loose leg waiting near the wall. Neither does the man who brought that. Evan stared at the stool. He could have crossed the room in 6 steps. Instead, he turned and left. The SUV remained in the drive for several minutes before its engine started. Repair day resumed unevenly. Conversation returned in pieces. Claire opened her laptop, but did not type. Owen carried the stool to the workbench. You gave him a way in, Ruth said. He wanted shares. He wanted instructions. He sells custom homes. Then he may be used to instructions delivered by people he can fire. Owen rotated the stool. Its loose joint needed cleaning before glue. What if he doesn't come back? Ruth adjusted the sharpening jig around her left hand. Doors don't become useless because someone refuses to enter. Her eyes moved toward the boarded Lakeside opening. They had postponed the doors through every emergency. Too expensive, too exposed, less urgent than heat, wiring, drainage, and structure. Now the plywood covering had begun to warp after winter. Ruth walked to it and placed her framing square against the original opening. We have enough cedar, she said. For doors? If you stop saving the best boards for a future that never arrives. Owen looked toward the tarped stack from the collapsed porch. He thought of the ruined dock beyond the grass, its thick planks silvered above the water. How long? He asked. Ruth handed him the square. As long as it takes to do the last thing correctly. They took the plywood down on a windless morning. Cold lake light entered the central hall in one broad sheet, showing every uneven floorboard and patched wall. Owen had grown accustomed to the house revealing itself one circle at a time beneath lamps. The open wall was merciless. It looks worse, he said. It looks honest, Ruth replied. You say that whenever something looks worse. It saves time. The original opening was nearly 12 feet wide, too broad for a single pair of doors. Ruth described 4 hinged panels that could fold against the interior walls, leaving the center clear from the kitchen through the hall to the lake. Mom wanted all of that open. She wanted to move tables outside without taking off the legs. Practical visionary. She lost 2 knuckles to your father's narrow apartment doorway. Owen set the framing square against the sill. The opening was not square. Its left side stood half an inch higher than the right, even after the foundation repair. We could correct it, he said. We could spend a month pretending the house was new. So, the doors follow the opening, the doors function in the opening. They selected cedar from the collapsed porch, cutting away rotten ends and milling the remaining boards in the workshop. The best pieces were barely long enough for the stiles. Every cut had consequences. Ruth stopped giving instructions before Owen requested them. At first, he thought she was testing him. Then he realized she was waiting to see what he saw. The grain reverses here, he said over the first stile. What does that tell you? That the planer will tear it out. What will you do? Finish that section by hand. Ruth nodded and moved to the next bench. Her approval no longer felt like permission. It felt like company. The doors consumed mornings before paid work and evenings after it. Owen built each panel on the central room floor, using loose tenon joints and cedar pegs, shaped to echo those beneath the old beam. Ruth made the first peg. Owen made the rest. Tessa helped salvage thick planks from the ruined dock. The outer section had collapsed into shallow water years earlier, but the boards closest to shore remained solid beneath gray weathering. They worked in rubber boots, removing rusted bolts and carrying the planks up the bank. What are these for? She asked. A table. You have tables. I have work surfaces, which are tables with emotional distance. He lifted one end of a wet plank. Ruth says Mom wanted a long table in the central room. Ruth says your mother wanted half the things Ruth wants. That has occurred to me. They carried the board between them. At the grass, Tessa lowered her end but did not release it. You ever ask Ruth if she loved her? Owen looked toward the house. Ruth was inside fitting a door joint, visible through the open wall. She loved her, he said. I don't know the shape. Do you need to? I used to think so. Tessa nodded. People spend a lot of time sorting love into containers that never agreed to fit. That from your aunt? No. That one's mine. Good. I was worried the town only had one philosopher. She splashed him with lake water and carried the next board alone. The dock planks became a table 12 feet long. Their bolt holes remained visible along the edges. Claire arrived one Sunday in old clothes, tied back her hair, and spent 3 hours sanding one end. You're pressing too hard, Owen said. She stopped the sander. I have watched you remove numbers from invoices with a pencil eraser. Do not instruct me on pressure. You're making waves. It came from a lake. That isn't how wood works. Claire stared at him. Ruth has damaged you. Ruth called from the door bench. He was like that when I found him. Claire lightened her pressure. She had brought Grant's old tool chest from the storage room behind the accounting office. Owen remembered the chest beside the Calder workbench years ago, though Grant had moved it to town after locking the house. Inside were good chisels, a socket set without missing sizes, 2 hand saws, and a block plane still wrapped in an oily cloth. I thought Evan took these, Owen said. He wanted to sell them. I kept them at the practice. For me? For Dad. Claire ran a finger across the chest lid. I didn't know the difference then. Owen placed the block plane beside Ruth's. You brought the kitchen boxes back. That was enough. No, it wasn't. He waited. Claire switched off the sander. Without its noise, the house seemed to lean toward them. I was angry that Dad needed you, she said. Not because I wanted the work. I wanted him to call me and ask for something I could give. He asked about payroll. He asked about payroll when he was confused. He asked for you when he was afraid. Owen looked down the length of the scarred dock plank. You could have come more. I know. I called. I know. Her voice did not ask him to make it easier. I thought that if I walked into that apartment, she said, I'd become responsible for everything I saw. So I brought groceries, reorganized the mail, and left before dark. I didn't need groceries. No, I needed you to sit there so I could take a shower without listening for him. Claire's face folded briefly. She put one hand over her mouth and then lowered it. I'm sorry. Owen had imagined those words many times. In every version, they made the lost nights lighter. They did not. They simply made Claire visible inside them. I'm sorry I made caring for him the only proof that counted, he said. She wiped dust from the table with her sleeve. It counted, yes. But it wasn't the only thing. No. Claire switched on the sander again. They finished the tabletop side by side. Evan came once while the completed door panels stood clamped in the workshop. He did not bring a client. He remained near the side entrance with both hands in his coat pockets, looking at the long table and the open lakeside wall. Claire said, You were almost done. Done with what? The restoration. Owen smiled. Nothing here works that way. Evan walked to the first door panel. He examined the joint at one corner and rubbed his thumb over a cedar peg. This is good. Thank you. Ruth teach you? Yes. The answer bothered him less than Evan expected. Evan glanced toward the yard, where Ruth and Tessa were sorting hardware. I have 2 clients coming up in June, just for lunch and a lake tour. No overnight use. No. They're adults with money, not locusts. The doors won't be finished for your schedule. They could be. Not for your schedule. Evan turned. So that offer about coming as family was only a speech. It's still open. But I can't bring anyone. You can bring a partner, a friend. You don't bring people here to make money from the place. What if I pay? Then you're a customer trying to buy something I'm not selling. Evan looked through the open wall at the lake. You always get to set the moral terms. No, I set the house terms. You set them in your houses. My houses have contracts. Mine has a door. Evan laughed bitterly. Not yet. Owen let the insult pass. We're installing them on the 21st, he said. Claire's coming. Martin, Denise, Lionel, Tessa, stay for dinner. And do what? Help. There it is. What? The performance. Evan carries a board. Evan admits Owen was right. Everyone watches the bad brother become teachable. Nobody here thinks about you that much. Evan flinched. Owen regretted the sentence, but not enough to withdraw it falsely. You don't have to apologize in front of anyone, he said. You don't have to agree with how I run this place. Come eat, sit in a chair, be difficult in person. I have plans. Change them. Like you changed yours for the last year of Dad's life? Yes. The word remained between them. Evan looked again at the unfinished doors. Then he left without promising anything. On the 21st, his chair remained empty. Owen did not move it away from the table. Installing the doors required nearly everyone else. Martin and Lionel lifted the panels. Denise monitored the frame. Tessa worked the temporary supports. Claire guarded the hardware and labeled containers and slapped away any hand that reached without naming a part. Ruth stood at the opening with the original framing square. The first panel bound at the sill. Owen removed it, planed a 16th from the lower edge, and rehung it. The second required a shim behind the upper hinge. The third swung cleanly on the first attempt, which made everyone distrust it until Ruth tested it 3 times. Certainty begins at 11, Tessa said. Only for gates, Ruth replied. The final panel was the heaviest. Ruth took hold of one edge, but her left hand could not close securely. Owen saw the frustration cross her face. Guide the bottom, he said. I can lift. I know. Guide it. She looked at him, then moved her grip beneath the panel where her palm could carry weight without relying on the missing fingers. Together, they raised it. The top hinge pin would not seat. Claire held the panel while Martin adjusted the support. Ruth directed Owen to lift, lower, and rotate until the holes aligned. The pin dropped through with a metallic click. Nobody cheered. They were too tired. Then Tessa began clapping, slowly and obnoxiously. Denise joined. Martin claimed applause near fresh joinery was unsafe, but participated anyway. Ruth opened the first pair. The cedar panels folded against the wall. Owen opened the second. For the first time, the central hall continued all the way to the lake. Air moved through the kitchen, across the long table, past the handmade pegs, and out over the water. The house did not feel larger. It felt completed in direction, every room finally leading where it had intended to go. Ruth stood at the threshold. I used to think I'd finish this and prove Grant wrong, she said quietly. Owen remained beside her while the others carried food inside. Did you? No. She looked at her framing square. He was right about some of my mistakes, wrong about what they meant. Finishing doesn't change the posts you buried. No, it changes what's standing on them now. Ruth's eyes filled, though no tears fell. Leo would have liked the doors, she said. You don't have to ration the answer anymore. Ruth watched Claire arrange yellow dishes on the long table. I loved your mother, she said. She loved me. Not in the same way, not every day, and not enough to leave the life she had chosen. We worked because the house gave us somewhere to put what didn't fit anywhere else. Did Dad know? He knew something belonged to her that he couldn't manage. He called it the house because that was easier. Owen considered the years Grant had spent allowing the building to decay. Not a single cause, not a clean villain. Pride, money, jealousy, grief, and unfinished work layered until nobody could see which damage came first. He doesn't get the last decision, Owen said. Ruth nodded. No, she said, he doesn't. Dinner filled the table. Claire brought the blue mixing bowl, this time carrying salad rather than history. Martin complained that the north room outlets needed another inspection. Denise argued that his inspection labels were crooked. Lionel hummed while cutting bread. Tessa sat beside Owen, her knee touching his under the table. The empty chair for Evan remained at the far end. Nobody made a ceremony of it. The house did not become valuable in the way Evan understood value. It earned enough through repair work, room stays, and monthly workshops to keep the taxes paid, the stove fed, and the roof ahead of the rain. Some months were narrow. The tax account survived, the eat tin remained. Ruth continued using the workshop, doing less lifting and more teaching. Claire kept the books and occasionally brought a receipt merely to criticize the filing system. Tessa stopped inventing reasons for leaving food. Her boots began appearing beside Owen's at the dining room door. Late that evening, after the others had gone, Owen and Ruth stood at the lake opening and closed the doors for the first time. The panels met in the center without force. Ruth slid the bolt into the floor. Finished, she said. Owen looked back at the long table, the mismatched boards, the ceramic fish no longer needed beneath a leak, and the tools returned to their hooks. Sound, he corrected. Ruth smiled. Outside, the lake wind pressed against the cedar. The doors held.